Okay, I have a call to order the city council study session agenda, or excuse me, the meeting for Monday, May 23rd. Guess we're gonna go right into the discussion items. I thought there was a special meeting, but never mind. So who would like to present the ethics ordinance resolution?
This was intended to be more of kind of a working session, open dialogue back and forth. In the end, it's the ethics expert, so that's why she's here with us tonight. So I guess the way I would suggest, and it's really whatever the pleasure of council is, but to maybe go through some of the drafts section by section and address those if there's questions, concerns, or input with respect to those, and how council would appropriate for input. We can discuss that, and hopefully by the end of this, come out with a potentially working document that will benefit the city and just have some consistency and clear path for not only council members, but any other board members, subcommittee members, employees, as this would be applicable to everyone in the city.
And you said we're looking at the first one is ours, right? And then we're gonna be looking at the draft.
Yeah,
One that you have and see which ones, what works and what.
Yes, the first, I guess page 2 of your packet is what the city currently is the policy that the city currently has adopted. So, and then the remainder of it is the draft that was previously provided to you. And I believe that one's from Wolverine Lake. And then I also included the information from MML.
All right.
Why isn't the current policy okay?
It's just a
It's very
policy
vague,
and not
isn't it?
an ordinance. So that's the primary distinction.
It's isn't it part of the employee handbook or something like that? I've turned,
Yes.
yeah.
Does that mean that this is not enforceable, anything that's on here?
Well,
Yes, that's for you.
Yeah, so it's anything that's in the employee handbook is more directly oriented for and enforceable against employees. As council members, you're not employees of the city. Planning commissioners are not employees of the city. The city individuals that are part of study groups or advisory committees or boards, commissions are not employees of the city. And while we would expect them to adhere to the same standards as the employees, there is no enforceability provision of it, as there would be with an ordinance that could be enforced against any potential.
This does say city council at the top.
It does, but again, it's more of a guideline as opposed to an enforceable provision of the employee.
I don't know, is that just a caption, Susie, even where on the top of that page, or is that what it says right from the book?
That is exactly what it says.
So city, lake, village.
Correct.
And so I thought the draft, the one from Wolverine was, after reading through the MML book, was a good distillation of what was in there. It was kind of simple, but it covered most things and had repercussions and processes, although I think some of it need to be expanded a little bit more, but definitely seemed like it was a good starting point. One thing that I thought though, a lot of the things that we've talked about over the years are more procedural oriented. So kind of one thing I think that should probably be in the ethics ordinance is a reference to a procedural document that could be a living, breathing document from council to council in terms of setting up procedures and that way that gives the procedures some teeth as well.
Right, and that's something that, right now we operate under standing resolutions with respect to procedure. I think ours is from the mid to late 80s. I had also anticipated incorporating while maybe not in the ordinance, the procedure, but like you indicated, a document that can be amended and tweaked by some subsequent councils as they see appropriate. But that's also worth, and that's something we've been talking about for the past 4 years of updating the procedures and just making sure that everything is current and still in line with the objectives of the council.
Right, I think that should be part of this process that we're going through. because
Correct.
again, it should- One should refer to the other to make it enforceable.
If you look at page 4, at the second to last paragraph H, it doesn't spell out what the processes are, but it does, I think, it's kind of address as far as what you're saying that duties in accordance with processes and rules established by the council. So that there kind of refers to that.
Yeah.
And then they can be incorporated somewhere in there or in a, even more set, I guess. If you want it more of a working document, I mean, I think almost certainly like that, it would almost be something outside of the ordinance, because every time
Right.
you would want to change some of those procedures, so do that as a policy procedure of council, and then it's referenced in the ordinance, like there. that you're gonna follow.
That's exactly what I was suggesting.
Yeah, okay, so separate document.
This is like, I reached out to several residents and, I get a list of things to incorporate, but most of those were procedural. They weren't,
Gotcha,
major ethical things like are listed that are covered in the draft ordinance.
okay. Sure.
And again, what is the goal of this? I know Kelly said Bruce has been pushing for this. What is, what are you
And
trying to
if I may,
accomplish?
because I did write this or help work closely to, put this together for both Wolverine Lake and Milford has the same.
Mhm.
And they were just needing clarification more because they had something like what you have now, which is very not implementable as far as council itself goes, and also like members of the planning commission or other bodies of that. It just really sets it out clearly what's expected and does give an enforcement and repercussions for members of the public body or employees of what gives some enforceability. And I think it seems that Lathrup was kind of meeting that, where there was not a lot of direction as far as if there were issues amongst members of the public body.
And what do you mean issues amongst members? What do you mean?
Well, just any, things of not, for instance, as Bruce pointed out, the respect for process. So if there is a process in place, this helps if there's been some controversies about, I think from my knowledge, amongst council as to how things procedurally need to go, and some disagreements and maybe not, oh, this wasn't clarified and you're not following it, yet we're expected to follow it, that kind of back and forth. So I think that something like this, that can be part of it, putting forth what those procedures are, giving a means for enforcement of that. So, there's not discourse or disagreements amongst the council itself. And then also there's a lot more detail in here that is required if you look at the MML information that is required by law. Some of it is not, but quite a bit of it is. And I think it's just very beneficial to a public body to have this codified and have, direction for anyone that comes on in the future. They know what's expected, and it is going to apply to the employees and appointed board people as well. So I just think it's a win-win, really, for everybody to make it clear, and then the members of the public can see what is expected of their elected officials instead of, trying to wonder. It's all there. It would be an ordinance. Anybody can look at it at any time and know what to expect of their employees, the people that their tax dollars are going to pay, and also the people that they've elected. that answers the question.
Well, there's been a few attempts to kind of control things by parliamentary procedure and that kind of thing. But that doesn't really set a way for people to communicate, to talk about things, if you have a difference of opinion on something. If there are questions about the, I mean, I still haven't gotten my FOIA since from May 2nd. So, you know, it seems almost as if it's more of a control kind of a situation rather than something that is necessary beyond what we already have in place.
We don't really have much, and again, we don't have anything in place that's enforceable outside of the very brief language in the charter that deals with council conduct, and roles and responsibilities. And on more than one occasion, it has come up that there are potentially have been issues with council members not following the process or not adhering to certain state laws, things of that nature. And it's not just targeted at one council and person and individual. There's been questions that have been raised both ways as to, well, what procedure are we following and what is the appropriate, you know, remedy for this and who's in charge of that. I think having an ordinance that identifies this and again provides a framework for how it's to be enforced, what the expectations are, and also understanding what the potential consequences for deviation from it are, is, as Lynn indicated, provides value not only for the council, but for the residents to see the standards and the process by which their elected officials are governed. And right now, there really is nothing in the city that represents or reflects that.
Two questions. How is it enforced and who enforces it?
So it would be enforced. Well, I guess it
I
could
think that's part
could
of,
be part of the discussion on how, but typically it would be enforced by the council members themselves. And it would be brought forth as it's been identified in here on a written complaint alleging violations. And then there would be an opportunity to address those allegations and respond to them. And then council could make the appropriate recommendation on how to proceed with situations on a case-by-case basis.
If you look at section 216 on page 5, this is what, and this is again why Scott wanted you to review this to see if this would work for your community. But as far as like Wolverine Lake and Milford goes, they wanted their the complaints initially to be brought to the village administrator and then the village manager in the case of Milford, and then go from there. You know, of course, if there's something that if the complaint is against the administrator, then, you know, there's of course a little different procedure for that. But if you read through that, that will tell you, and that's what we wanted you to comment on, if you thought that that was, you know, something that would work for you all.
I'll make a comment on that. You know, I like the suggestion in the guidebook where it talks about the council, the combination of the council, the city administrator, and the city attorney as the quote unquote board.
Yeah, I mean, that, again, that's oftentimes it's addressed and resolved by the administrator as part of their investigation and review. But I think if it does get to the point where there is a hearing or there is some sort of, we'll call it a contested type of a situation, that obviously that an independent panel would be the one that evaluated. And I mean, we have a construction board that, you know, we borrow from the city of Novi right now to handle, you know, questions or things of that. So it could be a similar type situation where there, you know, perhaps there's a board of residents or something, or, you know, with staff and legal input on it, that would be the deciding body. Yeah.
Is that what you have in Milford and Wolverine Lake?
I think that.
Yeah, well, it has where-
It's the village council in both of those.
And the complaint initially goes to the administrator, who then does an initial investigation, but then it does go to council. And if there's any question, you know, then council. And then if it's a, you know, it shows here the village council president shall set or any 3 council members may require a public hearing at a regular special meeting to determine, to look into that. So it's not just one person here making these determinations. But again, if it's a council member, that the allegations are against, it can't just be that person. I mean, there needs to be other things. And then ultimately, though, the village council, at least is what they do in Wolverine Lake and Milford, that the village councils, does impose the sanctions, or they make their decisions on, whether they just do a reprimand or, an official censure. For instance, we had, I don't remember the specifics, but there was a case somewhere where a council member had maybe publicly disclosed something that was discussed in closed session. So that's like one type of an idea of something that where this could come up against a council member. And I think there was just a
Censure.
censure for that, because that was a violation of state law and an ethical violation to just publicly disclose something that was discussed in closed session as an individual person, not as a the council as whole. So that's just an example of things that could arise that would require some sort of action potentially. And then it was the whole council that, that was just the censure was what the sanction was that was imposed. And I must say, well, in my experience, and again, it's limited just with these other communities, it hasn't been a real great need for, to do anything with this, thankfully. But I think it is a benefit to have it, because then that does help to stop the problem before it could become a problem, by having a written law, so to speak, of law of the city.
It seems subjective. Could we go through the standards of conduct and talk about each of these things, or?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I had anticipated, is to get some input, feedback, and if it's something that you feel is appropriate, or then you can include it. If you feel it's not appropriate or needs to be modified, you can address that.
Well, the first one up is conflict of interest.
Oh, yes.
So we want to go through each of those as we are, so pretty much the conflict of interest would apply to any board member on anything. And if they have any personal connection to something that may be in front of the board that they're making a decision about, then that should be disclosed. And that might be something that they need to disclose, make a decision as to whether or not they should be participating in that particular issue. So for instance, like on a zoning board of appeals matter, if one of the zoning board of appeals members has
A request for appeal.
yeah, or it's like a relative or something like that, it could be seen as a conflict of interest. It could be seen that they might be they might have some influence over it. Even if they don't, it could be an appearance of that. So that would be something where they would want to recuse themselves, because it is something beyond what a normal person might have, because they do have a connection. So that's one, just a very general. I mean, that can apply to a lot of things, but I think people, I think it's a common sense thing as well. That you should know when you have a conflict, or if you suspect that you do, then you should disclose it. And the board can decide if that is relevant or not. And that kind of flows into with the business transactions as well. that would also give rise to a potential conflict of interest. If you have any business with anybody that you're making, maybe potentially making decisions over or that come before you, and again, that applies to all boards. So that would be another thing where they should make a disclosure of that interest so that there can be no claim of a conflict. Confidential information, similar, if there are things that you do get that you are exposed to that are confidential due to your position, then you can't you should use that information to your advantage at all.
You give an example of that. We haven't really had any closed sessions since November.
Or if you did, and sometimes there are like applications. Sometimes businesses may make an application or if there's like a request for proposal, request for work. There are at times confidential information that might be confidential business information that it's someone that's bidding on something and you agree to keep that confidential until such time as you may make your decision on the bids, things of that nature.
What about things being public records and all that kind of stuff?
So the public record said that probably more applicable would be the scenario that Nan had described earlier with something in a closed session that was discussed, whether it be acquisition of property. If the city had decided they were going to make an offer to buy somebody's house for $100,000 and then, Barb calls her cousin and says, hey, if you tell them you can get it for 110 and it's yours, because we're going to offer 100. That would be a situation where disclosure of confidential information, or if there was pending litigation and we discussed, or the attorney handling the case discussed trial strategy or settlement strategy, and somehow the opposition then found out about that trial strategy, which has happened, unfortunately, has happened in the past where you walk into court and then they say, oh, I hear you guys are going to do this. I said, well, where did you hear that from? Obviously, it came from someone in the closed session that disclosed that to the opposition. So those are probably the more likely scenarios where that would be, because you're right, most things that are submitted to the city are public, are searchable and are obtainable. So with the exception of like sealed bids and stuff like that.
Personnel matters though too, because this does apply to the employees. So if in the course
Sure.
of their, they get insurance information or some sort of a medical information or things of that nature as in the employee realm of things, HIPAA, anything like that, that's also something that's confidential that they can't be disclosing.
And who determines what's confidential? Because I remember asking for something, I had a FOIA something, and it was stamped as being a confidential contract, and there was no way that it should have been confidential. So who determines what's confidential?
Should be by operation of law, I would say. It's not.
Yeah.
I mean, we know there's a law, like as far as personnel records and medical stuff, that is, there's just,
There's specific exemptions under FOIA for what can and cannot be disclosed when it comes to certain documentation. I'm not aware of any contracts that would be confidential.
No, I know it shouldn't have been, but it was stamped that way.
unless something like Scott previously mentioned, where it was bids, potential bid on property or something like that. Before
Before
it's
it's sealed.
accepted.
So should there be some kind of reference then to the laws about what's confidential information?
Is there a definition? Do we define confidential information? Means
Yes, it's
information that's
on
been
the-
obtained in the course of holding public office or employment that is not available to members of the public pursuant to FOIA or pursuant to other law, regulation, policy, or procedure recognized by law. It's defined in the definition section.
I just want it to be arbitrary.
And then personal opinions should not, an official should not get on like Facebook, for instance, and say something that could be taken as the opinion of the board. The board or the council speaks as one. Decisions of the council are by agreement, by the majority, that's who speaks. So I think that's.
And it doesn't mean that you're not entitled to your own personal opinion or that you have to reflect the opinion of the majority of council. It's just that if you're going to be acting as council or speaking for council, that you can't represent that your personal opinion is that of the city. Situation several years ago with a planning commissioner that represented to a certain grant applicant or a grant recipient that position of the city. It was their personal position and not that of the city, and potentially jeopardize the city's receipt of that grant or continuation with receipt of those grant funds. So
Yeah, so it doesn't mean, as Scott was saying, that you have to agree with what the whole council, you might have a different opinion, but you can't represent that as the opinion of the council.
Who is responding as City of Lathrop Village on Facebook these days? Who has the power to do that? Is that still, Bruce, you still have that power?
I probably still do. I probably haven't been taken away, but I don't respond. I haven't responded since we took the.
we don't, yeah, the city should not be commenting upon or posting anything other than what's on the city's website, or I'm sorry, the city's Facebook page. It shouldn't be
Yeah.
engaging in dialogue or discussion on any private groups or forums or
think-
posts or.
Pam and I are the only two that have access to post for Facebook.
You know,
For this-
official city page.
Yeah, on the official city page.
Well, Bruce
I
did,
mean,
that's what I was just wondering if
Right.
that has been rescinded. or
Right, in
whatever.
2019, the policy was we were going to try participating on villagers and that. and
Right, it was
so-
you and Cheryl, yeah, I
Yeah.
remember the policy, yeah. I just
So-
wondered if that was still the case, because, okay.
What is the official Facebook page?
City of Lathrop Village.
Well, we do have multiple pages.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. The official one is called City of Lathrop
City
Village.
of Lathrop Village, the
Police
Parks and
Department
Rec
has one.
has a Facebook page, the DDA has a Facebook page,
And the police
and
department.
the police
Main
department
Street.
has.
Are they all?
That's not, the women's group is not an official.
I said
she
Main
said-
Street.
Oh, Main Street, that's the DDA's page.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I thought you said the women's club first. I don't know what I heard, but, so we just have those pages, the city's page, Parks and Rec, DDA, and police. Those are the only official pages that the city has.
Are they all linked together?
No, we are, we're not connected to the police department page, I don't think. I know that I can get to DDA, Parks and Rec in the city, but I can't get to the police department page.
And why is there a need for so many?
We all do our own thing. I mean, the DDA is a separate entity, so that's why we have our own page. I don't know if there was a reason for separating Parks and Rec from the city. If there was a reason for it, that was before my time, so.
Moving on then, the appearance of impropriety is sort of a nepotism, and it that sort of idea, and it goes along really with conflict of interest, but so they kind of are together, but it just is a little more succinct regarding family members and just an appearance of impropriety, or it could look like there's some wrongdoing, or not wrongdoing, but someone's getting an advantage by being a family member or close relation to a member of a board or an employee or somebody, that has a decision-making ability again. So that's just another iteration of conflict of interest, really a little more specific detailing of that. Then use of the village property and resources, or city property and resources, again, is just that an official or someone who has control over property and resources of the city should not be using them or allowing others close to them to use those, if that would be something that wouldn't also be available to the general public. And except there's a few, yeah, the other exception is if it's a policy approved by council, or if there's someone conducting their official business. So otherwise, everything should be, all city resources should be available to everyone equally. If that's
To all residents.
And then gifts, favors, loans, that is more, I think you can read through those to be more, they're pretty self-explanatory. If you had a question about any of the particulars, or if you, don't want that, don't agree with that, we can discuss, but
Yeah.
I think it's pretty, those are pretty clear.
Yeah, I had a problem with one of them. Number 10. That kind of surprised me that was in there. I really think it would be 0. Is there a reason for having something like that?
I think we did it, decided for that because it isn't, it was could be considered of a de minimis amount, and it would be something like, gee, at Christmas, somebody gives cookies or.
Yeah, like
you know,
if, you know, and like. Around the holidays, purchase lunch for the staff or something, a consultant might provide a gift. Or, you know, we used to make donations in the city's name to nonprofits, things of that nature. It's just
So it's kind of a catch, at least why we kept it. It might not be exactly, but we didn't want it to be too harsh. If there are small things that really aren't, the intent of it is not to
To
violate
influence,
or to
right.
influence or to do that. And $100 is kind of an accepted amount, I guess,
Okay.
of like, it would be considered like the minimus, so that if there was something that slipped through the cracks, so to speak, it wouldn't be a violation.
Yep.
Anything else on that one? or-
No, can you go through those?
Pardon me?
Can we go through those?
Okay. Well, sure. So gifts such as, well, it's pretty much any gifts, but then what we're talking about here in specified were things that don't apply. So opportunities, benefits, and services available on the same conditions as for the general public or participants at any national, state, or local conference or trade association meeting. So I think that's, maybe allows for certain employees or council members to attend events, is what I'm seeing there. For that, it kind of allows for that. And then just, anything that you might need to participate in that, because not every citizen is going to do that, but if some members of the city or whomever we want to send them there, I think that's best that I can guess on that one, really. What do you think,
Yeah.
Josh?
So maybe if you're at Capcom and a vendor gives you a thumb drive or something like that.
Right, and then,
That kind of stuff.
correct, because then any member of the public that's attending can
You get that
get
as well.
that same thing. And then anything that you get fair market value for, or pays fair market value. And then if you want to do a lawful contribution under anything that is made under the campaign finance laws. So if somebody's going to contribute to your campaign, then it's a lawful contribution that's accepted from the from the prohibitions. And then, yeah, if a relative gives, happens to give you a gift, so that just would cover, well, that would clarify to make it very clear that if a relative is giving you a gift, then someone can't claim that you're doing something illegal or unethical by taking a gift from a relative.
If a relative is giving you a gift as a city employee or as a city council member or,
Yeah, like, for example, I'll pick on Barb again because she's next to me, but if, Barb's cousin owns a cannabis facility
Yeah.
that's looking to operate in the city, assuming that is legal, and they give her a Christmas gift, and someone says, well, look, she got a gift from a cannabis industry. What's up with that? Why are we permitting that? Well, it's her cousin. We can give her a gift if we want.
from a cannabis company or just from him personally?
From him personally.
So say in that same scenario, there was he was
He also-
coming before the board.
And
for-
he also gave a gift to Bruce and Kelly and Jalen and you, and now that's problematic.
Right.
For the four of you, not for Barb, she's good because that's her cousin.
But if that cousin was coming before the board for something else, asking for licensure or something of that nature, then she would recuse herself because that would be,
Or she would disclose it as a potential appearance of impropriety or conflict of interest. And again, those situations are typically dealt with on a case-by-case basis, looking at each occurrence on a specific level. And okay, is this again, just the deepest example further into the ground, but is this a cousin that always gives her a gift every Christmas, or is this, someone that just came out of the woodwork and happened to find out that she was on council and, made it a point to buy her a Rolex this year for Christmas, just, because they were nice.
and that flows into the number 5 as well. Same idea, only applying to a friend, someone that you've had a personal friendship with. If it's just, their birthday or Christmas, same idea. And then again, a case by case basis, if it is something more not nefarious, but if it's not something outside of a gifting due to a personal friendship, then that would be something that could be explored on a case by case basis as well. And then food, that kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. So I guess that is allowing for some food for some events to be provided.
Yeah, and sometimes like, in Novi, we do, or we've done in the past, we'll make a donation to the State of the City breakfast, we'll donate donuts or something like that, or consultant will donate a food item that has a value less than $100 for that public event, and there's nothing gets bad with that, so.
The intergovernmental gift, we give to an official employee, another governmental entity. So I guess I presume that is just, similar idea that
We're
one person's gonna show their appreciation to another. And
Chief McGee is gonna send a cookie basket to Berkeley PD for letting us use their lockup. There's nothing wrong with that.
if someone is bequesting someone, or you inherit, same idea, that would be with the gifts, would probably most often apply to a relative or something like that, so that would be another exempt thing. And then as we discussed before, with Bruce's question, the $100 limitation on any
Catch-all.
one sort of.
They prohibit, like, why can you take something from a prohibited source?
Well, this, again, this is an exception if the value is less, if it would otherwise be prohibited if the value is less than $100 or a nominal value. I mean, again, this is subject to your discussion and input. If you wanted to allow to take a gift or be able to receive a gift from someone that would otherwise not be able to provide you with that. You know,
You can read
Kelly
that.
gets married, Kelly's married, who's not married, everybody not married?
Jalen.
Jalen, you know, gets a bottle of wine as a wedding gift from someone that otherwise wouldn't be allowed to provide him with a gift. That could be, you know, assuming it's a cheap bottle of wine, he's all right, you know, if it's something expensive.
But if you want to remove that and to prohibit anything, you know, that's fine too. You can take that out.
Does this include businesses soliciting in the neighbor or in the village, taking people to lunch?
You talking about employees or?
Well, it's for everybody.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely would include if they were, again, if it's exceeding $100, if they're, you know, taking employees out for that, then yeah, that would potentially, that would be covered by this.
Any further discussion on those items, or do you want to take and modify any? For the city?
Well, number 7, food, refreshments, lodging, transportation, and other benefits resulting from outside business or employment activities. If the benefits have not been offered or enhanced because of the official position or employment of the official or employee and are customarily provided to others in similar circumstances. Can you explain that? I mean, that one's pretty, lodging, transportation, and other benefits. What,
Trying to think of a scenario where if council wanted to go to a conference and we didn't have a vehicle large enough to transport to all the council members there, assuming everyone wanted to ride together, or if this conference just so happened to be, you know, next to a hotel that I owned in that city, and I wanted to let council stay in those rooms free of charge, then that would be allowable, assuming that it wasn't, you know, I didn't give everyone the suite just to wow you over to renew my contract.
and so there's no dollar limit on that one?
No, that one I think it's as long as it's the same that would be provided to anyone else in that circumstance. And again, it's a pretty, that's a stretch to kind of come up with that
Right.
scenario where something like this is actually going to fit into that criteria.
Or if someone had a second job. If an employee or, you know, one of our board members in the ZBA planning commission, that's not their job to be on the commission. So if they, through their regular employment, are getting something, that's exempted. If, as long as it doesn't interfere, that the purpose of the person offering them in their outside employment, this benefit is not meant to get some sort of influence over them because of their position on that board. I think is what that one's getting at as well, but for those that have other jobs, so, you know, like Barb, we'll pick on Barb again, you know, she worked for a florist or pick a job, and yeah, she was getting some sort of benefit that was going to be provided. They were going to take them to the Tulip Festival. Somebody that wanted to sell her floral shop bulbs or whatever, and as long as that's her outside business, as long as they weren't trying to do it to influence her in some way, like, oh, to give her a permit for their business in the city or something, then she can, it's unlimited. There's no capper. It's not an issue.
It seems like there's some too much overreach here into personal things.
I think it's just really trying to make it as clear as possible, actually, because then it won't be a question like I think where you're seeing the overreach, it's more of like, let's clarify this, that we're not going to overreach into that. If someone tries to say, oh, you violated this, it's like, no, I was doing it for my job, my day job, and it had nothing to do with my position on the board. So I think that just gives, it actually clarifies it versus overreaching, at least that provision, I feel.
Doesn't seem real clear, but okay.
All right,
Is there, I'm sorry, so is there a way we can, since we're making this ourselves, is there a way we could make that definition more clear? Can we rewrite that definition or,
So we're, yeah. so
Sure.
we're doing
Work it
that.
out.
so
So
I'm
you-
saying, well, she said it's not clear, so I'm saying like,
Yeah, reword it, give an option to reword it.
sure.
And we don't want to preclude any, again, this wouldn't apply to staff because they shouldn't be moonlighting doing another job, but if it were boards or commissions that we wouldn't want to prevent them from being able to receive the benefits of their day job, so to speak. So what thoughts does the council have as to how to clarify that?
And they're talking about the definition does include outside business or employment activities. And then it says, in other words, outside activities that are not connected to the official duties. I'll just reword that more clearly. Or,
It says or outside, but, oh, okay.
yeah, if you can give a suggestion as to what you're having trouble with as far as clarity, then you could.
Well, no, we're having a conversation about all of these things. Someone reading this, if they haven't had a conversation, I don't know that it's clear about what it says, that's all.
So do you have a suggestion of how should we will word it so more people can understand it?
No.
Okay, so we're not doing are we doing a second draft for this?
We can work on it.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
this
We're
is
not
not,
voting. We
we're
can't vote on
not
this,
taking
right?
any
That's not
action or
what
anything.
that's
It's
not
just,
what I was saying. What I was saying is that this is an opportunity that we're here right now to be able to try to figure out, we read it ahead of time. And doing the edits, we could do it here, and so then it could possibly be on during our next meeting to approve it. So that's why I was just asking for clarity that we are trying to discuss it right now.
Okay, but if it wasn't clear, it was a little difficult to rewrite something that wasn't clear to begin with. So that's why
Well,
I'm
the
asking
intent.
questions now.
You understand the intent of it though, or what it's meaning to say is if you have a job that you can take benefits that might be provided to you from that job, non-city related, as long as the person is not giving that to you to try and influence you in your job. I guess we could reword it that way, if that sounds better.
yeah, I think we could clarify a little bit. It's just so that it's outside employment, business, or outside activity that's not connected. Maybe take the parentheses out of that. and not connected with your official duties as a city official or a city employee, that you're not precluded from taking advantage of those benefits that are offered through that organization, not through the city.
that
Yeah.
sounds good.
So we can definitely reword that for the next.
Next draft, yeah.
Does that help, Karen? Is it?
Yeah, okay. I guess I misunderstood too. If this is a working session, don't you normally have a working session and then kind of pull things back together and then go over it again, or just do it one time?
Yeah, no, I mean, we can, if there's changes that we incorporate here, we could put it on another study session, maybe not a solely dedicated study session, but we could put on a study session agenda. That a document that implements the suggestions that we received tonight. If there's further comments or suggestions, then we can modify as needed, and then this being different from a zoning ordinance would require first and second reading. So it would be something that after the first reading, again, another opportunity, if there's corrections, questions, changes, that can be implemented before a second and final reading. So probably at least 3 more opportunities, I would think, at minimum, unless there's a need for more opportunities to review it.
Okay, let's
So moving on then to subsection H, is everybody ready? And that was what we kind of discussed very briefly before. Two, that that just gives a requirement that everyone, whether they're an appointed official, an employee, there are certain processes that are there and that everyone should meet as part of their ethical standard of conduct to perform their duties in accordance with those rules and processes established. And the establishment of those are by village council, and that's village council as a whole. And yeah, in order to make more meaningful decisions and to be able to work for the citizens in the most efficient manner possible, I think, by respecting the process. That's kind of the intent of that provision as well, to get the most out of council, board members, employees, by having a process and having everyone respect that so that things can get done.
Yeah, I think the verbiage in there should, as we discussed earlier, should reference specific documents that, procedural documents that will the council.
We could put a provision in that says, as reflected in resolutions adopted, similar to how we had in the draft cannabis ordinance, that the scoring matrix was subject to change. Whereas
Right.
the ordinance itself didn't have to be amended every time criteria.
Yep.
Changed.
Well, and then, who sets the process and whatever, like,
Well, I was suggesting to say, or as Scott just said, but I was on my notes here, maybe saying reference in that provision, subject to specific procedural documents that will be adopted from time to time by the city council. And then you all need to sit down and decide what do we want, like a procedural document for council, a procedural document for the other boards and commissions, and then maybe, well, the procedural document for the employees is subject to their employee manual. They've already got their, and if you want to tweak that, I would add one for that, but then it could just be separate, like maybe 3 separate resolutions or documents that are adopted by resolutions. And then that allows you, as Bruce was saying before, to make that a working document, because you're not codifying it in a specific ordinance that has to go for readings and whatever, but you can change it. But again, that would be by majority vote of the council, because I'm adopting a resolution is by majority vote of you. So you're the ones making those decisions as to what the procedures would be. Does that sound, do you like that, Karen? Is that a fair way to do it, or and Barb, what do you think? Jalen?
well, no, I mean, majority of things have been, at least at 3 votes together, so it just depends on what the situation is with the council. and
So
how
what
that-
would you-
How that all goes.
Well, again, I think these are processes that
Kelly thinks it's funny, yeah.
You
these
know
are,
what, Karen, I am able to conduct myself right here. I haven't said anything, to you. Let's not do this today. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Scott.
it's, again, these are processes by, so if council, one of the things that has come up in this council more so than prior councils is the desire to have more input from residents on certain issues. So if the council decides that it should be part of the policy that before there's any
Major
ordinance
decisions.
being adopted or considered for adoption, that in addition to the two public readings required by law, that perhaps they were going to hold up a public hearing. That's a policy that council could adopt if agreed upon by council members. It's not necessarily policies that direct, so there's already implementation of. I guess we'll back up. So council's role is just, again, for the sake of discussing this, council's role is to create policies and establish policies for the city that are then implemented by city staff. Council is not the implementing body, council is not the day-to-day operation, but they're the policy creating and the policy guiding So if there are procedures that council would like to include or amend or omit in that policy decision process, those can be part of this type of a document. And again, we can look back to the rules of procedure that are currently in place that are being roughly applied. I think cleaning those up, and because there have been a couple situations where there has been confusion, and as I acknowledged before with the organizational meeting that's identified in the charter. Historically, the city hasn't done that. However, based on the conversations, I think that's an important policy that, whether or not, there's a meeting scheduled that within that time frame that council will have this orientation, or, I've had some conversations that perhaps requiring or implementing standards for minimum amounts of training, that something like that could be included as part of the policy for council members, that they, in order to solicit meaningful involvement from both, not only the public, but the council, that council be required to maintain so many hours of continuing education on zoning, or whatever the requirements of council may want. But I think those are things that would be more included, and oftentimes those are things that are subject to change. If the standards change, and as far as continuing education, or what trainings might be available or offered, then that document can be amended without having to amend the ordinance. So we can do that today, and we don't have the standing resolution as part of the packet, but we could kind of discuss some things if we'd like to. We could do that today as well, once we finish the.
You good with that for now? And then I is conduct of public meetings. So that's just pretty much common sense things, I would say. And sometimes I think things can get out of hand. There are hot button issues and people don't always agree. And, it's just human nature to feel emotional about things. But I think this sets down in writing what the conduct is that everybody needs to abide by to, once again, get the most out of every council meeting, get the most for the members of the public, have decisions made more easily, streamlined, stay on topic, that sort of thing. So I don't know if there's any provisions in there, or anything that you would like to be changed or don't think is correct, or wouldn't be useful, or.
Mine is cut off, just conducted public meetings, village officials and employees participating in public meetings shall prepare themselves. Then what does it say?
For public issues. So you need to be prepared when you come in. Have looked at your packet materials, be ready to have a good discussion. Ask good questions. Listen courteously and attentively to all public discussions before the body and focus on the business at hand. They shall refrain from interrupting other speakers, making comments not germane to the business of the body, or otherwise interfering with the orderly conduct of meetings. So that applies to village officials and employees participating in the meetings.
I don't have
That's all an I.
What's
Yeah,
that?
none of that printed.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
It's at the bottom of the page, we got one line.
One line and then the
How does
next
that
other
do you
ones.
This is what we have.
Printed them all straight from the packet.
It's in the packet though, online.
Right, it's online though. It's available under
Yeah,
meeting
you
code.
look at it. Yeah, that last little bit goes off onto the next page when you print it out. So again, I'll just read it real. Village officials and employees participating in public meetings shall prepare themselves for public issues, reasonable, listen courteously and attentively to all public discussions before the body, and focus on the business at hand. They shall refrain from interrupting other speakers, making comments not germane to the business of the body, or otherwise interfering with the orderly conduct of meetings. So that's again, just general. pretty self-explanatory, and again, it's, we should always be doing that just as courteous elected officials and employees. But again, I know, you know, myself, there are emotional things, not everybody agrees, but so we need to keep that in check. So I think it's a good thing to have that in writing as something that if it's not complied with, there will be a consequence that the other board members or, you know, or the council members and or the council against any employee that might be not abiding by that they can take some action to help correct that and not just let it keep going on. So. And then the final J, which I don't know if you have that printed, was just talks about that nothing in here is an attempt to lessen or make any less important any other requirement of law. But yeah, of course, all officials should and employees should comply with all laws in the performance of their duties.
Okay, part of I, the shall prepare themselves for public, whatever, said about reading your packets and that kind of thing. Is there somewhere we can make sure that the charter we have to have our information by Thursday night? Is there somewhere that can be enforced?
That's the part of the procedural.
Yeah, and I think the big thing for that though is that if there's items that are added to the agenda last minute, then there's gonna have to also be a cutoff so that there's adequate time for staff to get that information into the packet. More often than not, things are flying in Friday afternoon to be included for a meeting on Monday that then staff is working on the weekend to prepare the packet and get it out. So if there's a deadline, a cutoff date for agenda items, so you know, defer to staff on
We'll
a
probably
week in
try to
advance.
have-
It's pretty difficult to say. I mean, almost even that Monday or Tuesday, because I mean, it's
Well, it's difficult to be fully prepared, you know, to get a packet on Friday night that's 80 some pages to go over. When the rules clearly say we're supposed to have our packets of information no later than Thursday night. So that, you know, there's a lot of material to go through. If we're going to be thorough, if we're going to be prepared, then you know, it's difficult getting things at the last minute. So are there that many things that have to be thrown on the agenda, you know, the day before or 2 days before, or?
right. And I will say, I mean, don't forget, I mean, right now is we are under extenuating circumstances, I would say, for the packets. I mean, we are not fully staffed still. So, you know, trying to juggle getting
So prior
packets.
to this, you always got your packets on Thursday, before Thursday evening?
I'll tell you, when I was doing it, when I was the manager, they didn't get them till Saturday.
It's usually been on Fridays.
Yeah,
Yeah,
usually
At
it's
least the
Fridays.
5 years that I've been here.
But that can definitely be. I totally see your point, and that should be that way if we're gonna require that. So that's something moving forward with the new administrator. That could be one of their main, you know, a top priority with them. And with that in mind, though, again, then the public, everybody wants things, they will just have to be stuck with the strict deadline.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes now the speed of information moves a little bit quicker, and the expectation is that it doesn't matter, they can submit it and it'll get to the packet regardless of, and this is probably more so for applicants and things that are trying to have stuff done. Deadlines are very arbitrary. You know, we might not get information till 4 o'clock before a meeting at 6, so.
But I think it's a good thing to strive for moving forward, once you are adequately staffed to try and get that going on more strict basis.
Yeah, and that,
Cutoff is cutoff.
the Thursday night deadline, that's part of that 1985 rules and procedures that I did just circulate it to everyone, so that you do have an electronic copy of that. That's one of those things that would be included.
Should be updated, but I can
it-
say
it
in
should be,
11
and
years, the
again, I
police
think-
delivered mine and I got them on Friday for 11 years.
You know, and again, a lot of this stuff this was done before email, or even word processors were created. So, you know, a document that had to be typed and read, you know, access to information now, cell phones, laptops, I mean, in 1985, this was not a realistic possibility. So
Well, right, but it still takes you as long to go through the packet if you're
it does, but. you know,
preparing and reading and whatever. So, you know, to spend the whole weekend, staff doesn't want to do stuff to spend the whole weekend preparing for the, you know, for the meeting is, if there's going to be these regulations in here that you have to do this, then there needs to be something that allows us to be able to do that.
I think that's very fair to have a conversation between council and their needs and the administration and what they can do. And then come to an agreement on what is reasonable for the cutoff time. And then, yeah, put forward that if they receive their information, you know, if the cutoff or packet deadline is, or for you to get it, you need to have your stuff by Thursday. Well, then their cutoff and not adding any new agenda items or anything should be, you know, what day? You figure that out, maybe the prior week. That's what it's gotta be, because you have to be able to do your jobs as well.
Right.
But I do think, you know, once you get
That
it,
won't be done for.
fingers crossed, a full-time administrator to take that position, that's some things that are coming in new, they should be able to work with them to get them to
They
get on that course, you know, from the get-go. That might be a good way to they just start with that, you know, so it's not like something they have to backtrack on.
Thanks.
And as Scott said, keeping that in those rules, that allows you to flow with it too, to change, like, oh, if that is really not, that you guys pick a date and it's really not working for administration or for you all, then you are able to switch that up more easily. But it just takes dialogue, you know. Good thought.
I should, you know, if there's something important enough to be on the agenda, then it should be important enough to have enough time to be able to. Go
And then
over
like
it and be
your
prepared.
meeting so much, you're not explaining for the applicants or the administration or whomever is bringing up the issues is not spending so much time explaining what it is and then taking questions of just very basic questions of what is this even about? Hopefully the council members would be well informed to know and not to shorten the process by not asking questions that are would have the answer right in the material if it was fully able to be digested. So moving on then, I guess. Disclosure. It just talks about if you do have a conflict of some sort or impropriety potential, what the official or employee is required to do. And recuse him or herself and refrain from participating in the matter any further, inform his superior, if any, and then file with the village clerk a written statement about the reason for the recusal. And it will notify members of council so that may be attached the next minutes of the meeting. And in the case of council, if there is something that they can't participate, of course, they would just announce it at the meeting. And then council is informed immediately and it would be in the minutes because that would be part of the minutes themselves that would need to be attached for a member of council doing that. And then as far as compliance and enforcement, it sets out that this is what would be expected of the employees and officials. And that the council members themselves have the primary responsibility to assure that they understand and meet the standards expressed in this ordinance that you're going to adopt, hopefully. And that way the public can have full confidence. That complaints alleging a violation by an employee shall be filed. So this This just gets very specific as to what the procedure would be, where there's either a complaint of a violation by an employee or a board member or council member. So I can pretty much just read this out loud, if that's what be the best way to explain it. So if there's a complaint alleging a violation of the ethics ordinance by an employee, then those complaints are filed directly with the village or the city administrator. And then the city administrator will do an investigation. So that's like a preliminary investigation to establish whether or not there really was anything that occurred. And they will come up with an appropriate sanction that should be imposed. But if the employee is a member of a union, of course, then the union rules are going to take precedence there. So again, and in this case, as with the city here, the village administrator, or the city administrator is the person who manages the employees. So they are, anyway, that is their job to be the one that does make the decisions about the employees, with some exceptions. I had sent Karen earlier, she had a question regarding the role of the different officials, which maybe would be beneficial for, that I should send to everybody, or just the appointment of different officials, where, just as a quick little brief overview, council directly appoints the administrator and the city attorney. And the administrator will appoint the department heads and the clerk with council approval after that. But they're the ones that make the choices initially, and council can accept or reject those. And then anybody else is considered just an employee, not just an employee, but an employee. So, sound like that, but and that they are then directly employed or hired by the administrator and are under the direction of the administrator. The decisions. So I know there's been some questioning that by council of, well, why do certain people get hired? I didn't know about it. And that. And of course, you can always have an informational that they will report to you for sure about the employees, but it's not your business. And in fact, the charter expressly prohibits you from interfering with those decisions and getting into the day-to-day business of those. And that's why we have the administrator and the various department heads to handle that. So I kind of got off on a tangent there, but that's kind of why the first line of complaint for an employee would go to the administrator and not necessarily directly to council. And then complaints alleging a violation by any elected or appointed officials are again filed with the administrator, who does investigate as a first person and as a first line of investigation. And then if they get a reasonable belief that a violation has occurred, then they report the complaint and what their initial investigation was, along with their findings, to the council. And then in addition to receiving complaints from the village administrator, all village council members shall have a responsibility to intervene when they learn of actions of another village council member or other village official that appear to be in violation of the ethics ordinance. So it doesn't just leave it open to complaints by members of the public. And it does put a specific duty onto you as members of council to take action when you see or believe there.
And I think this section probably could use a little bit of clarification, follow up. I don't want to see a situation where council members are going around accusing other council members of violating these provisions and then starting their own investigations. I think it should be, the responsibility should be on the council members to notify the city administrator of the potential, and then have the administrator follow through with the normal investigative procedure, and then report back to the council as a whole, so that the council as a whole can proceed to the next step. I just think that we could clean it up a little bit.
Will there be a form to fill out or anything like that?
We could make one. I mean, I don't think it has to be anything. I think it should be in writing. It could be an email or a letter. I think, again, I think the administrator, that would be part of their responsibility, is to document a written documentation of what their investigation entailed, and what, again, it's not, when it comes to elected or appointed officials, it's not the administrator that's going to be deciding what the punitive aspect of it, that would come from the council. But I do think it's important that they document, this is the information that we reviewed or I reviewed, and based on this complaint. And this is the information that I provided. So if this, and again, this is something that council will receive if they feel, and we've kind of discussed this previously, if council feels or council members feel that there should be additional investigation or additional findings made, or if they feel that there's a potential bias or conflict in the administrator doing the investigation, then they can either refer it to the police department, or to the police department to refer it to an outside agency to conduct that investigation, so that there's, again, kind of a level of separation, so that there's no appearance of impropriety.
And you'll flush that out in there.
Yeah, I think that, again, I think, that is an area of this that, just my belief, and what if I was sitting in those seats, I would want that to be included in this. Again, just because from time to time, things are alleged that there are, collusion.
It gives a second channel if somebody's filing a complaint doesn't think that the city administrator is being objective.
Correct.
Challenges come from residents.
Complaints from residents, yeah, absolutely.
And it says 3 council members, and 2 council members are able to call a special meeting at this point. Is that something that could be changed to 2 council members? Section E.
Council president or any 3 councils, so you prefer it to be any 2 council members.
Then that wouldn't be a quorum. That wouldn't be a quorum then.
Well,
If
again,
only
it doesn't,
two
this
people-
not a
is just
quorum,
calling
If only
for,
2 people were.
Or
Just requesting it, not.
I was
yeah,
just
and
trying to
and
catch
that
up.
provision is requesting a special meeting or a public hearing on the issue, or whatever the complaint itself is. There is already, again, this is kind of crossing over, but study session meetings can be called by the mayor or by 2 or more members of council. So if not related to
In the
ethics, ordinance,
process
if
of procedure.
2 council members wanted to have a study session, they could make
Or a
request,
special meeting, yeah.
or a special meeting,
Right,
they can make a request.
Okay, so
Right.
that probably makes more sense here. Change it to 2.
Yeah, unless we change it in the council rules of procedure to 3. It's-
No.
Yeah, I would want to throw out my suggestion again for this section here, again, based on what I read in the MML guidebook on ethics.
Which
to-
section?
8.
Sorry.
Yeah. It seems to me like it should be a slightly bigger body than just the council people. I mean, for a couple reasons. One, since everybody's picking on Barb today, Barb and I could, be accused of getting something from a cannabis organization. So now you're limited to just 3 council members to make a decision. So it would be nice if it was a slightly bigger body. Plus, I also think that both the city administrator as well as the city attorney have a vested, typically and hopefully impartial view of what's going on in the city. And I think they would be could provide valuable input to that board's decision-making process. And I know other cities have done that. And when I was reading through all the different options of the way that these boards are configured, that one kind of struck me as being, one that might be applicable and it makes sense. And I don't know what other people's opinions or views are on that, but it seemed to make sense to me.
So you're suggesting village council plus the city administrator and city attorney.
To make
added
the-
to that.
To make the board.
Okay.
But on that, I think council could, I would say it probably would be best to have the attorney not a part of the decision-making body. If that way, if there are questions on what the legal standards are or definitions that the individual providing the answer to that question is not also making the determination as to whether or not that standard has been met.
Right.
So I think
Or how do you feel about looking at that last sentence where it does say, just specifies in complaints alleging a violation by a member of village council, that member shall not take part in the proceeding? Do you feel the same that council as a whole could make the decisions on employees and members of other boards, but then add
To
additional
itself.
just where it's alleged violation by a member of council, then you could add the additional.
Yeah,
You
that's a
could
good
add it to
suggestion.
that, and just leave it as you as the decision maker for employees and board, other officials, but where it's involving council, we could specify that to add somebody with the administrator there, maybe.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know, who else would be,
I'm trying, again, and absent creation of an appointed position that, I'm thinking like the board of review. I mean, these are individuals that's a paid position, that they are selected from the community based on qualifications and past experience, that they would then come in and they would conduct the public hearing, they would conduct the disciplinary, if it were to be a council member that would be subject to that action. And again, that appointment or that board would go through the same process as any other board. It would be, applications would be received, recommendations for the position to be filled would be made by the mayor, and then appointments would be confirmed by the city council as a whole to that board.
so you're suggesting a whole new.
I'm saying it's a possibility. I'm not necessarily suggesting that is a great idea. Just saying that is a possibility to get. And again, that board can be, typically those boards would be comprised of residents that would apply for those positions and again, be selected based on their qualifications. So, the alternative would be to have, you could have the DDA board or something, members of that board could potentially serve on it.
What about taking,
Yeah, but
like
that's
spitballing, taking
separate.
the chair of the other chartered boards to add them to the council and the city administrator to make a bigger, I'm just thinking out loud here.
Again, yeah, it's, you're creating responsibilities for, at least with other entities, you're creating, planning commission, for example, you're creating a role and responsibility for a planning commissioner that's not been identified under the Planning Enabling Act. So it's really not an appropriate function of the planning commission to serve in that capacity. Whereas if the city created, and now maybe they would select some candidates for those positions based on experience on a board with the city, or experience on the DDA with the city as, a stakeholder in the community, whether it be a property owner, a resident.
It's like an ethics board.
And again, it would be a board that would hopefully
Probably not
meet very infrequently, if ever. So
Or an ethics committee.
A neutral
That would make a difference.
board.
yeah, that's what I'm trying to obtain as neutral as possible board. The deciding body.
His only duties are to act in the event there's a hearing required under section blah, blah, blah of the ethics ordinance. Something to that effect.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking like the construction appeals board,
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
has never met, but
Is
So-
there any sort of board at the county level that would, like an ethics board of review type of deal at the county level that we can borrow?
I don't know, are you familiar with any board at the county level? that-
No, I don't, but you know,
I
I,
don't get involved with
I,
city things.
No, good idea, but I don't.
I'm just thinking, like from a standpoint of like total neutrality, like they're not involved in anything. You're not at the whim of like, oh, well, this person's selected for that.
It'd be good that
function.
residents make that, be part of that decision, not somebody from the county who doesn't have a vested interest, I guess.
Well, again, this isn't about vested interest. This is about application of the standards to the conduct and the determination of what, if any, punitive measure would be. So it's not, these aren't going to be, this board or this body is not going to be making any sort of policy decisions. It's simply going to, it would be an individual or individuals that have the ability without any sort of bias to read and apply the standards to the alleged conduct. So not,
That would be, are you proposing in addition to the council or standalone? I think it's in addition.
In addition. Yeah, I like the bifurcated approach, whether it's a employee versus council, and then having council be the board with an addition of residents, I guess in this case, because they have to be residents to be on the board.
Yeah, and what if you were to do something of that nature, how many are you thinking? And how many do you all think would be a good addition to a number that you would want?
Maybe, because we'd have the council members already,
Correct.
maybe 3.
It would have to be a odd number
Right.
in the council meeting. Oh, me,
No.
Right.
Oh, well,
Right.
one of your, well, it would
Depending on
be
what
one
the
of one of
complaint
the
would be.
council members.
Oh, yeah.
You know, some of the council members are gonna be eliminated.
Right,
Right.
so,
So it really depends on what your complaint is gonna be and how many are gonna be alleged to be involved.
So
Right.
3 would probably be reasonable, but I mean, I would think it wouldn't be 2 council members together, I would hope, or I hope it's never.
I would hope
it's never
never
gonna
anybody,
happen, but I think that would be more keep it at a more manageable number too, and rare occasions. And again, did you want the administrator to still be part of that? Because that was also going to be another person. So the administrator plus 3 individuals, or the administrator plus 2 other individuals?
I don't even know.
Or do you think the
yeah,
administrator should not be on there?
well, if you have a board of 3 people, maybe we don't need the administrator. And that way it keeps them.
The administrator has already determined whether it's coming or not.
Right.
Right, but they're not the final, yeah, you're right, they're not the final. Signature, but you're right.
Again, I think because the administrator serves at the pleasure of the council,
Right.
I don't think it's appropriate for the administrator to making that determination. And, you know, I don't know, I want to speak to the administrator, but they may not want to make that determination if asked. The city does have a labor attorney that is pretty much removed from very much of the city operation. I mean, we could inquire as to his availability to perform on that board, or solely as his decision apply. I don't really know. I mean, just again, throwing out ideas for potential people.
I like personally one voice, but I like the 3-person committee in addition to council. I don't know how others feel.
Might be a good idea to have residents apply and just pull them on a rotating basis as needed. And add them in.
Well, again, I would recommend that, if this becomes an ordinance of the city, that a board be convened and placed on, basically on standby, applications can be taken. And again, subject to confirmation of council, those individuals could be trained on what to look for, what to do, and then how to proceed in this scenario. And then should that event arise or the need arise for their input, then they can be, summoned to to make that determination.
And the board to be, the 3 residents to be appointed as other board members.
Yeah, same, in the same manner that, you know, they submit applications for that position. Based on qualifications, recommendations are made by the mayor for confirmation by council. I almost think that having a
We should take that out.
board that doesn't involve council, or that, you know, if one council member were to make a complaint, or 1 or 2 or 3 council members would make a complaint against another council member, that those 1, 2, or 3 council members aren't also deciding the fate of the individual they just accused of violating the ordinance. Like, that could be a potential, thoughts on that.
So do we just make a separate board of 5 people?
It's kind of what I'm thinking, maybe 3 people that do it. If the complaint involves a council member, that the council as a whole is not going to be the one evaluating. I mean, the administration will still do the investigation and present their findings to, I mean, council can be present, obviously, but they're not going to be the body that's going to be evaluating and applying the standards in the ordinance and making the recommendation. I think they should be a recommending body, and then council can obviously adopt or not adopt their recommendation.
Because the next section is about imposing sanctions, so we probably should combine the discussion now too, because, yeah, do you want to have the board would then make that determination if there is a violation, then leave that, the council imposes the sanction.
I think the sanction could be a recommendation from that body. I don't think that body should be the one that implements the sanctions. I think it should be discussion amongst council members as to what the sanctions are. And again, I think, you know, Mr. Schwartz as a possible member of that, being intimately familiar with labor disputes and escalated discipline, I mean, I think he would be a great candidate for that, because that type of a role, especially when it came to making recommendations for sanctions.
But again, to clarify though, then we're only talking though about violations from council. Other
Correct.
employees, everybody else is still going to be on council. Correct.
Bifurcated process.
This goes against the charter because it says removal from office. You can't be removed from office unless you have a felony, right? According to what we have right now.
Yeah, I mean, if there's I think it's a violation of a state ethical standard, which again, most of these are just duplicating the state standards, but with a little more clarity.
I think
I
that's,
certainly think removal from office is an extreme remedy that I certainly wouldn't recommend that an individual be removed from their position based on, you know, again, it would be dependent on what the violation is, but I think if we were to proceed to that approach, that would be governed by the charter and state law on what's required for removal.
looks like
So
what they did in their ordinances, they said, they referred back to that similar section in the charter, saying that this would be, what is it?
Oh,
It would deem
misconduct
the
in office.
misconduct in office,
Correct.
if any, you know. So would that,
Does
that,
Lathrup have removal
Yeah,
for
we do,
misconduct?
yeah.
So
And again,
that,
but
that was the point.
part of the problem with our charter is that it's really loose. It's not defined what constitutes misconduct in office.
Right, so
Obviously, it's
that's
a
where-
higher standard than, you know, not being prepared for a meeting. But that's why I think if it were, you know, if an individual were to be subject to enough disciplinary action that it were ever to rise to the level that would probably be handled by an outside. That would probably be referred to the state attorney general for removal for misconduct. And we can identify that, should it, you know,
go to that level?
should it ever, anything ever rise to that level.
So then how do you- So that needs to be, that needs to be changed.
I probably would take that out. As a violation of this ordinance, a consequence that falls below the level of misconduct in office. So, you know, this would only deal with anything misconduct in office below.
Mhm.
And then if conduct was to constitute misconduct in office, that would then be dealt with.
Although their ordinance didn't just, and I think what we're discussing here is right now is just about council. members, but it actually also applied to other members of boards, which would be the same case here. So I think you should still, I don't know, if you agree, Scott, still have that ability to remove a ZBA member or a planning commissioner or somebody for misconduct. They can be removed. from
Is
their
there anything
office,
in
'cause that's
there?
not a, you know,
Is there anything in their rules that cover that? Since the DDA is separate, is there anything in the rules that removal from office?
I think there's provisions in the DDA bylaws for failing to attend meetings,
Yes.
similar to council
Failure.
members, but I don't know that there's for,
I don't think we have anything necessarily for conduct. I would definitely for absences. It can be removed.
But this would apply to them as well, so they could, if council felt that there was an ethical or a violation that was of such a magnitude for removal from office, council could decide that, at least the way this is written. I
Yeah.
think your concern is just not having a council member, elected official by the people
Right.
removed, but not just still
no, I
keeping
think,
that for
yeah,
like.
the
board members.
appointed position, appointed board and advisory commission positions, I think that's well within the purview of council to remove an individual from that role should their conduct rise to that level. But I'm just speaking strictly to other council members, given that it is a position that's elected by the residents and that there are state statutes in effect to deal with this kind of stuff.
Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah.
Yes.
See what we see it written out.
Everybody's- yeah, okay. Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that,
Oh, well,
Implementation.
the implementation. Oh, yes, that's what, this implementation was an important thing in our other communities, just to make sure that everybody is well aware, because it was something, a new ordinance that was being that had been adopted, and this is just basically to make sure that all board members, ZBA, planning commission, other things like that are informed and become thoroughly familiar. And so we did, upon somebody being newly elected or appointed to boards or hired, they were.
receive and acknowledge a copy of the policy.
That's just clarified that needs to be done, and that's put in the ordinance as well. There's no question.
Maybe at the next study session, we can go over the procedural document that you sent to us.
Yeah, I would say
Chance to
that,
look at it.
or we could print it off. I mean, it's only 6 pages. I think everybody's seen it at least before, maybe not recently. But it was part of the council training that I provided, as well as part of the, that Coco provided, so on the parliamentary training. But whatever the pleasure of council is, if we want to talk about it tonight, sure, we should print off 5, 6 copies.
I can, yes, I can print it if you'd like me to print it.
That's
Can I
fine.
talk about it tonight?
Sure.
Sure. Return.
Comes of this. This supersedes this.
This would still, the question is what becomes of the 1710 of the personnel manual. I think that still would remain in there.
There shouldn't be any conflict.
No, there shouldn't be. In fact, there's probably a little more that's in here that we could include into conduct to be included. These are-
Excessively absent party, for instance, that's something more
6,
employee
13.
related.
Yeah, these,
Or
again, these
disregard.
are more probably geared towards employees, but
handling on state property, misrepresenting time worked. So I don't think there's any issue with this being, I think this, in my opinion, can just stay because this clearly isn't conflicting with this at all. This does give some real specifics. for
Yeah, and
employees.
these as part of the employee manual too, these would be used for disciplinary purposes if an employee were to conduct themselves in that fashion. Well, I mean, in order to be guilty of this kind of thing, the taking this part of office is not going to be done under this ordinance. It will be done as a result of the conviction.
We need to take a, adjournment, right? Or just leave.
We're not done, right?
No,
We're
not
still-
adjournment, I meant
A break?
thank you.
Now there's 3 council members together.
I don't think Kelly's one of them.
I hope not.
So it would be done consistent, again, well, everyone's here, but
Mine just read, this was the card I pulled up from.
oh, yeah, and
Okay.
so again, we will talk about that here probably in the next. Double check. So it's not part of the administration, but under the charter, the appointment, it would follow the same rule for appointment of boards and commissions,
Which is,
which is applications are received, appointment recommendations are made by the mayor for individuals to take those positions, and those recommendations are approved or confirmed by council. That's how we currently do it. And then those appointments are, unless otherwise specified, I would do them, probably redo them annually.
annual,
We typically every January, we did it this year, reappoint to boards and commissions.
I think that's not a bad idea. I think you get more participation. We just leave it a year. Lifetime
Yeah, and
commitment.
again. Hopefully. Yeah, I mean, again, hopefully it's a body that never has to meet and convene, so. Yeah, the new ones were a couple days after. I needed. I started.
As like a guest speaker?
Yeah, it was like, you were in there.
Oh, cool.
Like mock. Council meeting. So I like to pass legislation, like, very good.
Larger than those meetings.
Free dress.
Thanks.
Why are we doing this now?
Not everyone said they wanted to discuss this now.
Well, we haven't really had an opportunity to just leave it alone.
Well, this document was provided everybody during the council training. It was also provided again during the parliamentary training. So this is something that everyone should have had. If we want to pass it to another
I
time.
have it, but it isn't something that I just looked at to
Yeah.
go over.
I kind of feel the same way. I'd like to review it and think about it and
That's fine.
come ready to
Yeah.
discuss it.
That's fine. I thought because we were kind of having this discussion, these are kind of go hand in hand. We could start on it. Again, it's not like it's going to be resolved this evening, but if we want to put it off, that's fine.
Study session.
Yeah.
What's that?
I said we could have just reviewed it and gone over it.
You
I
want to
think
do that too?
that, I think that we can go over it. It was provided to us numerous times, and so we
It
can just
wasn't
go.
provided to us.
Can I
for
finish
this
speaking?
evening.
Can I finish speaking first?
Wasn't provided to us. for
But
this
if I
evening.
could finish speaking, I would appreciate it. Thank you. As I was saying that, though it has been provided to us numerous times, that we can just go over it, just to kind of like, just go over it, and then we can bring it up in another study session also.
I'm fine with that too.
So, starting at 1.
Is that what everybody wants to go over? Is that what we're doing then? Okay. And again, it's not anything here. These are resolutions, so these wouldn't be subject to the first and second reading, but obviously we wouldn't put it on for adoption until everybody was comfortable with
Understand.
what's there. And again, this has been in place for 35 years.
I know, but it hasn't been followed because a lot of things I brought up, I believe this is where the Thursday evening thing is.
Correct,
isn't it?
which is why we're addressing it.
That's a good reason to go over it now.
So if there's things that are really irking council members that aren't being followed, this is the document procedurally that controls council, in addition to the standard parliamentary. But these are more specific to Lathrup Village. And Warrior, although I would say loosely applied, and have been consistently. How would you like to
So
proceed?
we can just go the same way that we did for the ethics.
Okay, so we'll start at number 1, the regular council meetings. City council shall set a regular schedule for its meeting dates, February through January of the following year as part of the agenda and its organizational meeting, the first meeting in January. Then place time, the meeting shall be determined by the mayor, shall be included in the agenda calling for the meeting. So typically we do schedule our meetings in January, and the clerk prepares the tentative dates of meetings and adjust them for any holidays that may conflict with those first and third Mondays. Issue with that or need to change this?
Go ahead.
Anybody? So special meetings, according to section 6.2 of the charter, special meetings shall be called by the clerk on written request of the mayor, the city administrator, or any 2 members of the council, and at least 24 hours written notice to each member of the council, served personally or left at his usual place of residence. We could add or email. But a special meeting may not be held on shorter notice if all members of the council are present, or it may be held on shorter notice if all members of council are present or waive notice thereof in writing, although there is still an 18-hour requirement for posting under the Open Meetings Act that would be required to be complied with. Anything on that one?
No. Not that for me.
Recess meetings, any session of the city council may be continued to another day, but no such continuation shall be for a longer period than until the next regular meeting thereafter.
Okay.
Study meetings, a study meeting may be conveyed or convened on call by the mayor or by 2 or more members of the council. All members of the council must be notified of the time and place of the meeting as set forth in rule number 2. Attendance at study meetings and notices calling on such meetings shall be in harmony with the provisions of the Michigan Open Meetings Act. The call for meetings may also invite such persons as may be required for consultation and advice with respect to the matters under discussion. At any study meeting, no formal votes may be taken on any matter under discussion, nor shall any council members enter into commitment with another respecting a vote to be taken subsequently at a public meeting of the council. All study meetings should be called by the mayor at a regular city council meeting. A brief confirmation of the time and date may be held at the meeting. All study meetings will be attempted to be held on the Monday nights between regular council dates.
Good.
Council meeting agenda. The agenda for all council and study meetings shall be prepared by the mayor with the assistance of the city administrator. The city clerk shall furnish a copy to each member of the council, the city administrator, the city attorney, all other citizens who are involved in the meeting, such as the chairperson of an advisory committee or other functions, on the Thursday evening of the week preceding the meeting. All reports, communications, ordinances, resolutions, contract documents, or other materials to be submitted to the council shall be delivered to the members of council, the city administrator, the city attorney, by the city clerk as early as possible, but no later than Thursday evening.
That seems like it could use a revision from what I'm hearing about the submission, because if people are submitting it at the same time as they're supposed to be providing, if the administration is supposed to be providing it to council, that doesn't jive. All the information should be submitted at least a couple of days ahead. That's how most of, at least my other,
I have to submit it like that Monday or the
Yeah,
Tuesday.
Tuesday, yeah.
What works? It's just we won't get stuff done quickly. It'll just be delays. But what's your?
Some even require, actually, depending on, I think like planning commission has different submissions than the council, but I think that some have it a week in advance.
Okay.
For submission.
I mean, Monday or Tuesday doesn't matter. I mean, at that point, it's kind of almost splitting hairs. I
Mhm.
mean, we are not going to be able to act as quickly as possible on some items. I'm sure that'll impact us, but you know, I mean, we have a deadline for planning commission that's, you know, between 30 and 45 days, depending on the type of application. So I don't always hear that either. So, you know,
I mean, even before we had this situation here, with, you know, 3 people splitting up the role of the city administrator, I mean, it was still a struggle to get it out. I mean, it was never out by Thursday just because of the overwork nature of the city administrator, even when we only had a single city administrator, so.
I think a week is the third submissions must be made by the Thursday prior, and then that gives the administration time to get all that information compiled, how it would need to be presented in the best way for you all to review it by the next Thursday. I don't know if that doesn't work from a practical standpoint, but 1 week prior to the,
I don't think practically it necessarily works.
It's too far.
It's too far in advance almost. I mean, not that we're necessarily throwing together agendas at the last minute, but I think a week is sometimes too far ahead. So I would say Monday or Tuesday.
So unless, I mean,
That
yeah, I would say if it's something that, you know, there's no additions to the agenda. So after the Tuesday prior to, you know, 2
Yeah.
days before, if information is to be submitted, and this can be conveyed to applicants or individuals coming before council with action requests,
Mhm.
if their documentation or information has not been submitted prior to Thursday, that item will be removed from the agenda. It will appear on a subsequent agenda.
That sounds reasonable, yes.
Because that's really the situation we're trying to put together documents. I mean, reports and things of that nature, those get included in the packet. That, I mean, is that what council needs more? I mean, the issue is that there's not enough time to review the information.
I've never gotten one on Thursday night. I've always had it on Friday, so I haven't been able to
Okay,
review
but I'm
it.
just saying,
So
if there's,
But have you ever not had time to, is the weekend have not been enough to, 3 days essentially, not been enough to,
It's been
I
fine
mean,
for
it's
me.
been fine for me too, so.
I know, but there's.
Wait, but it says here what the rule is supposed to be. So we follow rules or we don't follow rules.
That's what we're
the-
talking
that's the
about right now.
piece.
is
Well, right now, we're
how we
making-
specify this
But I-
rule.
But
Well, Karen, I think Karen is saying that for her, everybody's different for her.
Right.
She would appreciate that to getting it Thursday and having it all day Friday, or having it Friday at her
An extra day.
pleasure would help her. And obviously that was a reason, there was a reason, somebody else must have felt the same for it to have been put in here however long ago.
I'm a
And
realtor,
I
I
just-
work on the weekends, like, 'cause it's, you know, want to be prepared. Sometimes you need additional information. Sometimes you need to go back and see what's what. So just, you know, it's not having time to read it, but being prepared.
Which is the goal to get a smoother meeting.
Yeah.
So, and I think what Susie's saying is Tuesday. So have
Well, Tuesday for, yeah,
for submissions, and then that would help them if they kind of make a policy to stick with it, to everybody knowing, have it to Tuesday. Now, if it's something that they are getting themselves, then it's up to the administrator to, you know, to decide when they hopefully can have that information, or else they take it off the agenda.
Okay, I have a question. Our next meeting is June 1st, which is a Wednesday. Do we have to have it by Thursday night? Because the budget will not be prepared all the way by that time. I'm sorry, if you're gonna ask me to do it for tomorrow,
No, I think.
I mean, that is really,
extraordinary.
well, this isn't gonna be
It's not gonna
implemented.
be, well,
And-
it
and
is-
again,
well, I'm just saying.
These
because
aren't, this is a
it's-
resolution, these are guiding documents on procedure, it's not an ordinance. So there's, again, there's a little more flexibility in what it is, but I think that being a special meeting on Wednesday, the 1st, I think there's some
I
understanding.
mean,
from
everybody
council,
has the budget documents, but I still have to do
The
the
narrative.
water rates. Narratives probably will not be done at that time, but the water rates have to be put in yet. There's a bunch of different things, you know, I just, the stock stuff, Great Lakes Water Authority, I got theirs, I got the Oakland County stuff, all those big ones for the water, and I still don't know about all the road projects. I don't know about all the, you know, the hydrants and how much money that's gonna take. So there's still a lot of, you know, things that I'm working on with other people. But and if they had to be out by this Thursday, tomorrow would not work because I've got payroll to do too, so.
well, Monday is normal meeting, so you could add 2 more days onto Monday.
Monday
It's
is
a
a holiday.
Wednesday.
Monday's a holiday.
So. I'm just saying, that's my own personal,
No, and again, I think,
I just,
I mean, I think council is understanding that on a case-by-case basis, certain things might come in a little bit late, but again, this is not the first time that council has seen this budget this year. I mean, it's been included in prior packets. You know, perhaps what is already been done can be provided with, you know, those final numbers being implemented. You know, whenever they're, whenever it's
okay,
ready.
no,
it'll
I'm
be done,
gonna
but,
do them
yeah.
as best as I can, but I mean, I plan on working on it over the weekend too, so. I have been working on weekends on it, so.
Any other input on number 5?
So we are changing these now? That we were just going through it and.
Well, I mean,
He's
I'm
taking
taking notes
notes.
and I will provide an updated draft based on comments, which we can continue to discuss and modify as necessary, but
And can I submit additional things to you?
And if you have, if you know what your additional thing might be, then let us know right now.
What,
So I'll take notes on
that was the point about not having this to go over and be prepared to say. here's-
Right, oh, no,
you know
no,
what I'm saying?
no, I
It's-
understand, sorry, I just thought if you do know something now, or have something to say. please
Okay.
let us know.
all right, so official reports, whenever possible, reports by the city administrator, city attorney, police department, city clerk, advisory boards and committees will be made in writing to the council, submitted prior to the meeting and listed on the agenda. Under such procedure, discussion at an open council meeting will be limited to general questions from the audience or the council on the subject matter of these reports. concluding action may be taken at this time. Items requiring action by request of city administrator or city attorney will be listed as regular agenda items. And unless conditions make it impossible, will be submitted to members of this council with the agenda for meetings. Copies of other reports will be distributed to the city council. For the
If I may interject here, I think that unless conditions make it impossible applies to the issue that we're having right now. So. Covers for extraordinary, exceptional circumstances. So.
And this is, again, this is the same, how we've pretty much been handling departmental reports. If there are, questions, general questions about that from either council or audience, typically whoever authored the report will address those at that time. If there's more detailed questions or concerns about items in there, then those are removed and added to an action item at a subsequent meeting, as opposed to taking action on agenda item reports that are more complicated than just general questions. Number 7, correspondence. The city administrator and mayor are delegated the responsibility of handling all correspondence. Under this system, only that correspondence which necessarily requires council decision on policy will be brought before the council meeting. Copies of other correspondence may be distributed to the council for their information. So this is consistent with the policy that has been applied, that not necessarily every public comment that is received is read into the record. Relevant comments are read into the record, or comments that require decisions on policies are read into the record. As long as all the comments that are received are provided to council for their information, then that is sufficient. And again, this is probably important because with online comments now, and we get comments sometimes minutes before the meeting or even during the meeting, that are either read or distributed to council members for their information.
So related to correspondence, one issue that, and maybe this needs to be brought up in a separate place, but since we're talking about correspondence, one of the procedures that we've had for the prior councils that I've been on is that if council receives correspondence from a resident, that only for consistency's sake, we've always had just the mayor respond, and if individual council members had comments, they would provide them to the mayor, who would then distill them and respond. So that way the resident doesn't get 5 separate answers that may or may not conflict with one another. So is this under correspondence?
That's the first sentence, that the city administrator and the mayor are delegated the responsibility of handling all correspondence. So if an individual council member gets a correspondence directed at them solely from a resident or an applicant or something, that they can respond to that. I would recommend that they share that with the mayor so that it can be included, with not only the inquiry, but also the response. But if there's a correspondence that's addressed to all of council, it's important that, like you just said, that individual making that inquiry not get 5 different responses, especially if it's an issue that has yet to be brought before the entire council or discussed at an open meeting. That in that scenario, the response from the mayor or the administrator would be that we've received your comment. It'll be included in, or if appropriate, it'll be included for discussion at our next council meeting. And then, the mayor or the administrator can then follow up, again, consistent with how we've handled it in the past, follow up with that individual as to whatever the outcome of their input was.
Can we make that more
yeah.
explicit in that section?
Yeah, because while it makes sense, but sometimes, think you're doing the right thing and then you just, you respond and you don't tell the mayor or something like that. Is it possible to just put it in the correspondence, like a definition of how we handle email?
Yeah,
like basically whatever, yeah, exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
These things work though when council is on the same page on things, and that hasn't been the case.
Well, whether council is in an agreement or not on an issue, it goes back to what Leanne was talking about earlier. One individual council member should not convey their personal opinion as the view of the entire council, because the council acts as one body. And sometimes that's the challenge of the council, is to come to a consensus where not everyone agrees, but ultimately you have to come to a consensus as to what the action is going to be. And again, it's on a policy issue. It's not an operational issue. If it's simply, hey, there's, I noticed that so-and-so's house has had a trash can out there for 2 weeks. I mean, okay, we'll send it to the mayor will send it to the administrator will delegate it to whoever, code enforcement, and they will then follow up on that and report back to the administrator, who will then update council. I mean, that's how that should handle. It shouldn't be an individual council member says, well, while we're allowing trash cans to be kept on streets on the south side of the city for 3 weeks, and on this side, whatever the response may be, it may not be a consistent position with all of council. So that's why it's important to having one individual, the mayor, respond if it's an issue that if it's not something that's as simple as trash cans, if it's an issue that has to be discussed and an agreed upon response, then the correspondence is simple. It's like, thank you, we've received it. This will be added to the agenda and discussed amongst council. If there's concerns or complaints, again, if an individual, because each one of you represent the residents and have different relationships with different residents, they may feel more comfortable coming to Barb with a question than they do coming to Bruce. So Barb may get a question that Bruce doesn't get, then Barb can convey, and if it's something that she can answer directly, she can answer that, or she can respond to that individual and say, this is an issue that we're going to discuss at council. I forwarded your inquiry to the mayor. The mayor is forwarded to the administrator for inclusion in an agenda discussion or a study session or whatever it may be. But there's nothing that prevents you from responding to a resident, but when it comes to interpreting or making a decision based on an inquiry, I think that should come from the council as a whole and not from an individual council person. Nor should the mayor make the decision and then send it out and that be final. So I think if there's anything that there's a question that needs to be talked about or discussed, and that's the way it's handled. And again, that's the reason, the rationale behind that is that, so that resident is not, they send an email to every council person and they might get 5 different takes on the same issue. And now they're saying, well, I don't know. I mean, half the council says I can do it, the other half says I can't, and I never heard from one of them. So I don't know what's going on. So that's why funneling all those correspondence and communications through one individual, one, it makes sure that nothing gets lost. And then 2, there's consistency from the perspective of council. It helps the council look very organized, put together, that council members are on the same page and that they're not answering the same issue in a different fashion.
And do you see any issue? I mean, because I know I've done this in the past where I've responded to the messages come to all council members and I just respond and say, thank you for your message. The mayor will respond shortly.
I think that's fine. Just an acknowledgement of it, but I mean, when it goes beyond that and, if you receive, something is sent to all council members and you receive it and take it upon yourself to investigate it, resolve the issue, and then respond back without ever coming before council, that, and not saying that you do that, but I mean, generally you will bring it to council, like with the snow, the walkways with the snow with the school. So, but that stuff, again, the response to those issues that haven't, if it's facts and you're just relaying something that, oh, the meeting is on, the special meeting is next Wednesday, the 1st. Okay. But if it's something that hasn't been determined or, it's a course of action, then that needs to come from the council. And I think residents like to see that their concerns are discussed amongst council, that it provides them with validation that my voice is being heard and it is being addressed by everyone and not just one person or one staff member. So I just think that that flow, that mechanism provides for that, and it provides consistency. And, initially, after some time, there will be an understanding of what the expectation is from residents. And okay, some people will submit a question, and talked about earlier, this desire to have an immediate response and instantaneous results. Sometimes that's not always possible, especially when it requires implementing a policy or involving maybe another department or an entity that is going to have to act. So I think just by acknowledging it to the resident that it is received, it'll be discussed at a future date, gives them some framework as to, okay, I've submitted my complaint, it's been received and it will be addressed. Now, if it goes, meeting or two and it doesn't get addressed, then I think that's where, residents start to get frustrated and feel like their concerns are being ignored. But at least the acknowledgement and then the placement of it on an agenda, I think is appropriate for major things. I mean, again, little things, I don't believe it's necessary.
And I don't know that that's been the practice, that it's been placed on the agenda, not a lot of times.
I think it depends on the issue, and again, I'll use the example with the sidewalks that was brought up at a council meeting. It was a correspondence that was received, and then it was brought up and discussed, and the action plan was to for the administrator to reach out to Southfield Public Schools and advise them of their obligation, or just remind them of their obligation to plow off that sidewalk. So if there's other examples, I'm trying to think of something, but I'm not sure what would have been not handled or not addressed by council. Anything else on correspondence?
No.
Attendance at conferences, the selection of the city's representative at conferences and meetings with outside organizations and officials where an official designation is required. It's delegated to the mayor with the concurrence of council with substantial expenses involved. So that's probably, I would again encourage conferences to be attended by more than just the mayor. So that's one that may want to consider revision, that attendance at conferences, or maybe make it compulsory that council members attend at least a certain number of conferences a year. There are a number that are offered and provided. That's something for consideration.
Is there a budget for that?
That's something you have to talk about at the budget meetings.
I know, but is there currently a budget for that?
Last year, I don't think, we might have budgeted, but we haven't because of the COVID. We haven't been going to conferences because of COVID.
But previously there has been.
Yes,
We've been
previously
attending
there has
CapCon
been.
twice a year.
Yep.
Number 9, presiding officer, the mayor shall take the chair at the time appointed for council to meet and call the members to order. The role will be noted by the mayor and recorded by the clerk for the minutes. The mayor pro tem shall take the chair as presiding officer in the absence of the mayor. And that provision, I feels pretty self-explanatory, a little redundant. I don't know if it necessarily needs to be in there, but yes. In the absence, temporary chairperson, in the absence of the mayor and the mayor pro tem, the clerk shall call the council to order and call the roll. If the quorum is found to be present, the clerk shall appoint a chairperson to act until the mayor or mayor pro tem appears. Council privileges, the presiding officer may move, second, and debate from chair, subject only to limitations on debate are those by rules imposed on all members, and shall not be deprived of any of the rights and privileges of a council member by reason of his or her acting as a presiding officer. So
That doesn't happen, right?
That's the best.
generally the mayor or the presiding officer will not move or second
Right.
unless sometimes there's nobody else to move or second. This is just simply saying that they have that ability, and simply because they're the presiding officer doesn't strip them of the right to make a motion or second a motion. The quorum in order, Number 12, meetings are to be formal with the enforcement of stringent rules for debate, which will control the expenditure of valuable time. The presiding officer shall preserve decorum and decide all questions of order, subject to formal appeal to the council as a whole. Every person desiring to speak shall address the chair and shall wait to be recognized by the chair. He or she shall then confine himself or herself to the question under debate. Every council member desiring to question the administrative staff shall address his questions to the city administrator, who may either answer the inquiries or designate some member of staff for that purpose. Council member once recognized shall not be interrupted while speaking unless a point of order is raised. No
I'm
questions?
sorry.
Number 3, thought that was a big one. Maybe we want to talk about that, but.
What, the
13,
decorum and
quorum.
order?
The majority of council members.
Is that what you, I'm sorry, what did you say? You thought this was a big one?
I thought that was a big one. We might want to talk about it, but that's fine. We'll move on.
Nope.
Quorum, the majority of council members elected shall constitute a quorum. In case that a lesser number of them quorum shall convene at a regular or special meeting. The majority of the members present may send for any or all absent members by agreement. In the event a quorum cannot be obtained, the meeting must be adjourned. It's the duty of each council member to notify the mayor or administrator if he or she cannot attend the city council meeting.
So I've got some questions on that last sentence. So our charter talks, and this has been an issue in prior councils. Our charter talks about, I think, like the removal, it talks about a felony, and it talks about, I think it's 4 straight absences, unexcused absences, but yet there's no definition of what's an excused and unexcused absence. So it had been the practice up until I think a year ago that it was just blindly, if somebody was gone, somebody made a motion and approved it as an unexcused absence. But I know lately, at least in the last year of the last council, they had to give notification.
We were asked to give notification.
At least a few hours in advance is what we had been talking about. But so I think we need to have some type of definition of what's an excused and unexcused absence.
I can address that as, in another one of our communities, there was an issue with that. And so we did draft and they adopted an ordinance to address that. And basically, well, with them, it was 3 consecutive meetings without excuse as described below. It would be a reprimand, informing them that they're in danger of vacating their office pursuant to the charter. And then after the reprimand, or not the reprimand, the warning notice, and if they fail to do 4 more, there would be a vacancy. And so the procedure for it was, if a member, just what they did, if a member of council is unable to attend a meeting, he or she or their representative shall contact the village clerk and or the administrator prior to the meeting, whereby the absence will occur, to advise them of the absence and the reason for that. General references to other village obligations, work unrelated to village business, health, or personal reasons could be provided. Upon notification of the inability to attend the scheduled meeting, the village clerk shall verify that the quorum will be present. Then the absence of a member and the general reason therefore shall cause a motion to excuse the absence of the member to be put before the council at either the missed meeting or at its next regularly scheduled meeting following the absence. And then failure of the council to adopt a motion to excuse the absence shall result in the absence being unexcused. And a determination of whether an absence is excused or unexcused by the council shall be reflected in the minutes, noting the reason. And so they basically left it up to the council because everyone had different opinions of what should be excused or not. So for instance, a council member may vote that no, on their absence should not be excused for themselves. And one council member felt very strong that his work, even if it was work related outside of that, that should not be excused. So that was his opinion, whereas other people then would vote to excuse his absence. So it kind of addresses everyone's own personal opinion of what should be excused and what shouldn't count. You know, is a health reason, is a vacation, family vacation, you know, some people think, yeah, vacation, that's fine. Other people don't, and like I said, the work thing, so that's how they handled it, because they did do it, an ordinance for that, and then at each time they're supposed to notify, I'm not gonna be here, then they know, then a motion is made. And it's just right at the beginning of the meeting, just a standard thing, motion to excuse absence. What's the reason for your absence? They say the reason, and then the council votes on whether it should be excused or unexcused. And it
Upon their
works, it's
return.
worked pretty well, to tell you the truth. It sounds kind of weird or complicated, but it's actually worked fairly well. You know, and then everyone's satisfied because their own personal view of what should be excused and what should not is counted towards that.
And I would just to add to that, I don't know that it would necessarily need to create a separate ordinance for that. But I think putting that in here and identifying that at a very minimum, if no call, no show, not excused.
Right.
If it's called, like Leanne's saying, if notice is provided that they're not going to be there with the reason, if council feels that that reason is justified and excuse, then
What's
leave it
the
to that.
notice? What do you think about the notice? How much notice?
Timing, I mean, again, I'll leave that up to the preference of council, but I mean, things happen and,
Right.
you know, traffic accidents, whatever. I mean, it may not be possible to always provide a day or two's notice. I mean, certainly if you know ahead of time you're not going to be there, you can do that. But I think, I mean, if it was me sitting in there, I would probably be a little more lenient. And if, as long as someone called or texted, hey, I'm caught up at work, or I'm stuck in traffic, I'm going to either be late, or it doesn't look like, you know, I'm going to be there at all, you know, leave that to the decision of your fellow council members. But I think any notice provided, in my opinion, would at least get you on the table for a motion for consideration to be excused.
So it sounds like in their ordinance, they said prior to the meeting.
Yeah.
Yes, if possible. So, but I think that's why they did either the
A lot.
motion might be at that meeting
Or the next
Or the
one.
or the
next
next, if it's kind of a last minute accident, you know, who knows? Things
Right,
can
so,
happen.
could we say like an hour or two prior to the meeting and still put that stipulation in, so then it could be, because the situation that we ran into, one of the prior councils was, you know, we had some people who just didn't show up, and then we couldn't have a meeting. We didn't have a quorum. And there was no notice whatsoever. So, I mean, if we say a couple hours before the meeting, but then we leave that stipulation in, so that if we find out that somebody got in a traffic accident and they had to go to the hospital, we can then rectify that at a subsequent meeting.
Bruce is voting no because OnStar didn't contact the city council. I don't know, they were.
I think that it should be at least an hour before, only because if everyone else is trying to get there on time, and then you have a couple people, like what the situation was before, and then you get there to find out you don't have a meeting. What are you gonna say, Pam?
I was gonna say you'd want to give the other council members, if you
Right.
don't have a
Right.
quorum, you would want to give the other council members
Right.
a chance to notify them, to tell them there would not be a meeting. And then to post it too. So I would think 2 hours.
2
at
hours,
least.
yeah.
And that goes to the city clerk or the administrator.
2 hours if possible.
Phone call, text message, email, some type of document.
Some sort
you
of
know, yes,
correspondence,
yes.
hour to two in advance. Or, and again, I think leaving that option of having, you know, at the subsequent meeting, if the explanation is justified or warranted, that excuse could be excused.
Anything else on this one?
And 14, city administrator shall attend all meetings of the council unless excused by the mayor. He, she shall keep the council fully advised as to the needs of the city and make recommendations to the council. He, she may take part in the discussions on all matters concerning the welfare of the city and shall have a seat but no vote in the council meetings.
This might be nitpicky, but one thing that never mind. Never mind.
Anyone else on that one? City clerk shall be the clerk for the city council and shall attend all regular and special council meetings unless excused by the administrator, wherein the administrator shall provide for the recording of the minutes. Clerk shall be responsible for keeping minutes of the meeting and shall perform such other duties in the meeting as may be in order. Within 1 week after meetings, the clerk shall furnish each council member with a copy of the minutes of the preceding meeting.
We don't really do that now, though. It's usually at the next meeting, we get the minutes from the previous meeting.
Correct.
So do we need to keep that in there? I mean, I think that's, personally, I think that's enough time to correct the minutes, to get it in the packet.
I think that's, yeah, change that. To change it to the, by the next, packet, the next meeting.
Council meeting, the next.
So the clerk's required under OMA to have a draft within 7 days. So if they are required to meet that, then I think it shouldn't necessarily have to be provided, but
It's
should be available if
Yeah.
requested.
I believe that is available, isn't it? It's just not in our packet until,
Yeah, so can we say just the draft just needs to be within 7 days and furnished to council by the next council meeting? Or I guess technically, if we're making Thursday the day, by Thursday prior to the next council meeting.
Yeah. City attorney will skip right over that one. City attorney shall attend all regular meetings and special meetings of the city council unless excused by the mayor. Any members of the council may at any time call upon the city attorney for an oral or written opinion concerning routine questions of law with respect to the city, which do not require extensive research.
okay,
Right of appeal, any council member may appeal to the full council from a ruling of the presiding officer. If the appeal is seconded, the presiding officer shall immediately put the question of sustaining the decision of the chair to a vote. These
So-
are Robert's rules.
yeah, okay, that makes sense then.
Voting, every council member present when an ordinance or resolution is put to vote shall vote either yes or no on a question during a roll call. The only exception to this requirement for voting shall be in the case of conflict of interest, which shall preclude a council member from voting. So everyone has, that one, I don't think it's ever come up, but
That came up once.
but you have to vote,
Right.
whether yes or no, you have to cast a vote unless there's a conflict of interest. So, Number 19, personal privilege, the right of a council member to address the council on a question of personal privilege in cases where his or her integrity or motives are questions shall be given preference over other discussion. Any member shall have the right to express dissent against any ordinance or resolution of the council and have the reason thereof entered upon the official minutes, and whenever possible shall present to the city clerk his or her expressions in written form, the official records. So this would be, and again, if there's a no vote, I always encourage this to put your rationale, at least orally, place it on the record why you're voting no for something. It just provides more information should there ever be a question to whether that decision was arbitrary or capricious. Number 20, code of ethics. City council members occupy positions of public trust. All business transactions of such officials dealing in any manner with public funds, either directly or indirectly, must be subject to the scrutiny of public opinion, both as to the legality and the propriety of such transactions. Council members shall not have a pecuniary interest either directly or indirectly in contracts of any character with the city unless fully or publicly disclosed to the full council and handled in accordance with the proper legal procedures. Council members shall conduct themselves so as to bring credit upon the city as a whole and so as to set an example of good ethical conduct for all citizens of the community. Council members shall bear in mind at all times their responsibilities to the entire electorate, shall refrain from actions benefiting special interest groups at the expense of the city as a whole, and shall do everything in their power to ensure equal and impartial law enforcement throughout the city at large.
Wouldn't this whole section be redundant?
Yeah, I think we could yes and no. I think we could reference the ethics ordinance, but
Just add, I would say keep it and then just add and council shall abide by any
Ethics ordinance.
any ethics ordinance adopted.
Yeah, it's fine.
we're referencing this in our ethics.
Right,
ordinance,
it's
referencing
kind of
it back.
circular reference, so but that's why I
Just
asked the
state
question.
it a different way.
Yeah.
I didn't see a reason to take it out.
Yeah.
So order of business, this one has been, I know this has been changed over the time, but the business of all regular meetings of council shall be generally transacted in the following order at the discretion of the mayor. Call to order, invocation, roll call of council, discussion and approval of minutes, disbursement reports, petitions, public hearings, passages of ordinances, introduction of ordinances, passage of resolutions, city administrator report, city attorney's report, reports of boards, commissions, and committees, new business, old business, correspondence, legislative review, and adjournment. Notice there's no public comment.
Yeah, public comment.
Bless you.
Should probably put public comment on there somewhere, even though it does say the mayor's discretion, but
I mean, I think the current format with the utilization of the consent agenda is beneficial, especially for things that are
Redundant.
pretty routine,
Not
that
routine,
can,
not
that can
redundant.
be addressed in one motion without deliberation. So unless there's any objection, I would revise this to reflect our current, with allowing for 2 opportunities for the public to comment. Parliamentary procedure, the conduct of council members shall be in accordance with the manual on parliamentary procedures entitled Robert's Rules of Order. Come up with a couple of revisions since this. So we're up to the 3rd edition. Ordinance introduction, except when public interest requires otherwise, the normal date for introduction of ordinance will be set at the council meetings following the regular Thursday receipt of agenda at which the proposed ordinance is supplied to the council members in writing. Introduction of all ordinances shall follow charter provisions, a summary of which has been prepared by the city administrator.
Okay.
This, I mean, again, these ones typically the information, for example, like with the ethics ordinance, that would be set well in advance, the first reading of that. Permission to address council. Persons other than members of the council and city officials shall be permitted to address the council upon recognition by the presiding officer by introducing the subject upon which they desire to speak, stating their name and address. Presiding officer may limit participation by the general public to designated times during the meeting.
We took out the address part.
Yeah, I mean, you could request that they identify themselves, but they're not required to provide their address.
do we want to put something in here that council should refrain from discussion with public comment? Unless there's clarifying questions, in other words, give them their full 3 minutes.
Yeah, we can put that in here. Permission to address council and maybe call it council procedure during public comments. Happens a lot in the planning commission where one council or commissioner may continue to answer questions. And then the public, the person's like, wait a minute, where's all my time?
Right.
State or federal cooperation procedure, all proposals for projects which contemplate cooperation with or financial participation by the state or federal government shall be transmitted to council by the city administrator. If the city board or commission desires to propose such a project, the proposal shall first be filed with the city administrator. All proposals shall be in an approved form and accompanied by proper plans, specifications conforming to the requirements of respective state or federal governments. Council approves the proposal, it shall be by resolution, authorize the city administrator to make application to the proper authority. Think of that time we've ever cooperated with the state or federal government on a project. Local,
Local,
Like
yes,
other-
I mean, would it,
local intergovernmental agreements, South City of Southfield, but MDOT stuff is not
I was gonna say, that's the only thing that I can think of would be not projects, but
Number 26, suspension of rules. Any provision of these rules not governed by the charter or code may be temporarily suspended at any meeting of council by the presiding officer unless objected to by any council member. Such objection must be sustained by a majority vote of the council. The vote on any such suspension shall be taken by yes and nays and entered upon the records. There you go, Pam. To amend rules. These rules may be amended or new rules adopted by a majority vote of all members of council. Any such alterations or amendments to shall be submitted in writing at the preceding regular meeting and shall be placed on the calendar under order of new business. This requirement shall be waived only by unanimous consent with the recorded vote of all members. Administrative tribunal hearings, where the city council sits as an administrative tribunal to review the actions of an administrative official on appeal to grant special use approvals under Articles 10 and 16 of the revised zoning ordinance. And like instances under statutes and ordinances, the hearing shall be governed by rules 31-40 as attached. Rules 1-27 are intended, 1 through 27 are intended to apply only to those council members where the council is acting in its other capacities. That whole section is going to take some work because zoning ordinance Articles 10 and 16 don't exist anymore. Special use approvals are 6.2.
Yeah.
We'll update
Yeah,
that.
we look forward to seeing that.
I'm not sure what rules 31 through 40 is.
they were not attached, just saying.
I have a book with all these resolutions.
So a few things that for us, I've got a list of that I got from residents and some of my own things. So one thing I think we should talk about
On
is
the ethics or on the?
on this, the
Policy.
procedures. I think that the MML's newly elected official training or equivalent should be a requirement for all new council members. And maybe, like you said earlier, maybe including, some type of continuing education, like at least one course.
I think something like that could be included under number 8, attendance at conferences, that there would be either a continuing education requirement, a minimum number attended or hours spent obtaining, whether it be at a conference or online trainings or whatnot.
Well, I think the
The MML one, that's at no cost, correct?
Cost.
There's a
There's
number
a
of-
cost.
There's a cost.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I agree. I think we should put something like number of hours, annually for council people, but I think the MML training, the equivalent, the newly elected official training, I think that should be spelled out separately.
Make sure adequate notice is given though, because I didn't get a welcome from them until after it was too late. The training had already taken place and it was too late to even do anything. So you put the requirement in there, make sure that there's something in place.
How many times a year is it offered? Just once or?
No, it's throughout the year. I
Yes,
thought.
it was
Throughout the year.
one time for the new members, yes.
Well, yeah, obviously, if you're not notified of a training opportunity, you can't be required to attend it, but I do
That
think,
year, but you could
yeah,
pick
but
it
you
up.
could pick it up next year. It's like you judge. Been on the bench for 2 years and then they finally get trained. You said you had other one?
Yeah, so I think we should have some type of social media policy included in this.
We do have a social media policy for, that's personnel policy.
I think that's in the
Personnel file.
personnel. I think it's a little bit different for council. I mean, again, going back to what we talked about earlier is, individual comments can be perceived as the viewpoint of the council as opposed to an individual.
Yeah.
I know it's generally been the recommendation that council members, your legal advisement is that we stay off of it. but I think we need something in writing.
I think in the application of the current policy to council members, if it's not already applicable, would be appropriate. I don't know that we necessarily need to create something specific and unique to council members, but just. You actually.
I did one.
We can provide.
Because we have to sign off on it.
Again, the big concern I have with social media is when council members inevitably get sucked into a discussion online. And then now we're, one, the issue that it potentially becomes an issue that, or a forum that needs to be subject to FOIA and then archived and backed up, and the logistics of that are next to impossible. With the volume of posts, but then you start into a discussion, and that's potential OMA violations. Those are my biggest concerns with social media. Commenting on things of city business or city related business. But yeah, we can put together something like that.
Okay, and so does the ethics, I'm just trying to think back to what we just talked about, but in terms of the ethics ordinance, I mean, there are things in the charter that are not necessarily ethical. So for example, we as council aren't allowed to direct staff. But if those kinds of stipulations are if a council member tries to direct staff, I mean, that's a violation of what we're saying in the charter, but does the ethics ordinance allow us to, as we've drafted it, allow us to address those kinds of situations? Because I don't know that those kinds of things are specifically mentioned in the ethics ordinance.
I think we could include any sort of charter or ordinance violation. I mean, it kind of goes without saying if a council person violates them, but I think, yeah, spelling it out in the ethics ordinance that they would, that type of conduct would constitute a violation of that ordinance, that any sort of violation of any sort of city ordinance or charter could be potentially subject to that discipline escalation or escalating discipline that would be outlined in there. I think that makes sense. That's logical. Because right now, there really aren't any specified penalties for violating that unless it rises to the level of misconduct in office. So you go from 0 to 100 really fast. And I think there needs to be steps in that.
But the charter does stipulate something about except for informational purposes, you can get questions answered and that kind of thing, not directing staff, but you can have questions answered. We're trying to get information.
Yeah, I think what Bruce is not referencing is about inquiry, it's about council day-to-day operation type functions or roles.
Right. And I was just using that as one example of things that are in the charter that could be violated by council members that are not specifically addressed in the ordinance. That was kind of my point. That was just kind of an example.
Yeah, that would be covered.
Yeah, I think we just reference it. It should be.
And then under the training, just going back, it's 24/7 for the local government 101. They have an on-demand webinar that you can look at.
All right. That's why I said some of them are not necessarily actual, like sit down,
Yeah.
spend a day or a weekend training. You can do online.
Well, the last time I looked, there wasn't anything else available. It was just the training session, and it was online. It wasn't in person.
Yeah, typically, I mean, we will, when training opportunities come up, I know Jill's pretty good about if there's stuff on the zoning aspect of, and that's probably the one area that changes the most is the zoning laws. And so that type of training, it's good. It's probably good to do annually anyways, because one court decision can unravel your ordinance pretty quickly. So staying on top of that, I think is a wise. If you're gonna pick one area to go to some zoning training.
Right.
And I have a bunch of them, webinars.
And did we say at the beginning that we were going to reference this document from the manual and our ethics ordinance.
Oh, that was Barb's question during the break.
Yeah, I think it
What
should be.
becomes of this? And again, I think this is probably, and what Bruce was holding up and what Barb asked about was the excerpt from the personnel manual. I think there's some crossover of that into the ethics ordinance, but that is probably more specifically geared towards employees. And I think keeping that in its entirety, again, the personnel manual is an appropriate place for that. Some of that information, like I said, some of those things we can incorporate, some of them are already incorporated.
Right.
But
Yeah, but if you could review them and figure out which ones need to be followed, because I think those address a lot of the things that residents brought up to me.
Back on the social media policy, I'm just looking at what is in there as far as employees go, and that's more directed towards employees, I would definitely say. So if there's some specific things that you want to, that as far as like discourse back and forth, and again, I think that goes back to the correspondence that Scott explained as to the procedure that would be taken. The social media would include, with council members, include that procedure where anything on there that's like a question or directed to a specific council member should go to the mayor and to the administrator.
Right.
So that would apply there. So I guess there could be a separate section added to this to address council specifically.
Yeah. Personally, I like to see that as guidance, so.
What you got?
That covers it.
anyone else have any comments or questions?
If none, then we'll open up to public comment, and speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Is there anyone that's online or in the audience that would like to speak? Now come to the
I just had a question for the city attorney and also a statement. Who is the outside agency I would contact if there was illegal behavior of a council member and we don't have a city administrator? I heard you kind of speaking that in the ethics talk.
I mean, if you believe that an individual was broken some law, then I would direct your inquiries to the police department or to the Oakland County Sheriff's Department.
Oakland County Sheriff.
I mean, unless you have more specifics you could provide me, to give you a better direction.
Well, I would need an unbiased opinion.
Okay.
So I was just wondering what you're referring to when you said outside organization.
Yeah, what I was referring to with that is if the citizen had a concern that, something that the council had done as a whole or the administration had done as a whole was illegal, then they probably won't bring that concern to the council or the administration. They would either take it to the police department, who would, our police department is pretty unbiased. They would either investigate, or if they felt that it was something that was too close to home, they would refer it to an outside agency.
Okay,
So they do internal investigations a lot, so it's not, it's not an uncommon ask. for
but
a
isn't the
department.
police chief the temporary interim administrator?
He is, but
Okay.
he's still fully capable of doing his job as the chief of police, and he does have other officers, other staff and command officers that are capable of conducting those investigations. So, but if it's something you feel would be best outside the city, I'd start with Oakland County and they can direct you from there.
Okay, and then just a generalized statement to the council. We elected all of you to represent us, and we expect you to work together as best you can. And the reading of statements attacking one council member is quite unethical. And when we're talking about ethics, we just want you to all get along and do what the residents would like. So thank you for allowing me to speak.
I don't see any hands raised online and there's no one in the other room.
Okay. Council and mayor comments?
Just wanted to say that the Southfield Public Schools Open House is being held this Wednesday from 4 to 7 at Southfield High School A&T. The open house is for Southfield students in grades K through 12, Oakland County students grades K through 9, and Wayne County students grades K through 3. Also, I had a couple of questions that I wanted to ask at the last meeting, but I was not here. So we have a mental health awareness program sponsored by the LVDDA Boys to Men and In the Know coming up this week. Just want to know who is the target audience, a list of mental health professionals involved in the program, so I didn't see anything about that. And then I have a couple other questions.
The event is predominantly run by the Boys to Men Foundation. LVDDA and In the Know are tertiary sponsors, if you will. This is Boys to Men is their focus is on providing youth mentoring specifically to young men. And I don't know who their mental health professionals are that may be attending with them, but this is part of their network of services that they are offering.
But we're sponsoring it as LVDDA, so
We're a partner with them, yes.
but you don't know who the mental health professionals are involved
No,
in the
I do not.
program. Is there any kind of liability for us, Scott, as a city?
Well, I don't really know what I'd have to look at it and see if I don't anticipate any just being a recognition sponsor, but I'd be happy to take a look at whatever agreement, if there is any with
There's no
the
agreement.
organization.
There's no agreement. Like I said, we're just we're a tertiary sort of partner with them, helping to do this. This is something that they put on last year, and they asked us to help promote again. So we are happy to do it. Their target is, the youth and families that are within their network, as well as their broader network. I don't think they're going to be offering any sort of counseling on site. It's more of a let's bring awareness to mental health and know that there are resources available should you need it, and encouraging people to seek help when they do.
So there were vendors and stuff like that. So then who determines what programs the LVDDA supports? We've seen that. We've seen the Corvette car show, their meet and greet, those kinds of things.
The
Who-
DDA board of directors and their committees.
Okay, so one of the DDA board members is
Yes,
the person, the Boys to Men person.
yes.
So, okay, and is this option open to other residents in the community who would like to have the Lathrup Village DDA sponsor programs?
If it's something that is going to happen in the DDA district and it is helping to further the mission, then sure.
Further the mission? or-
Further the mission of the DDA to support a thriving business community, and a thriving business community also needs to have a thriving residential community. So we are happy and willing to promote different events, but the key is that they have to take place within the Lathrup Village DDA districts,
So
district boundaries.
the resident wanted to do something and wanted to come here to City Hall and do it, which is where this group is coming, then that wouldn't be a problem. We can put
I
out
mean,
to
it would
the
also,
community.
I'm not gonna, I am not going to tell you, yes, blanket statement, yes, it would certainly depend on something that we are. It would depend on what it is. So if you have a specific example, it'd be easier for me to answer that kind of question. Your question as stated is,
So you
no,
don't-
I would need more information before I say that.
So you don't really have a policy on what programs you support?
These
or
are-
what?
These are programs and events that the DDA board and the DDA committees choose to engage in.
Okay, and then also I noticed that our new employee is the director, whatever, of In the Know, who is also one of these sponsors.
Mhm.
How does that, who also is connected to the DDA member who is putting on the program? How does all of that, we're talking about ethics and rules and all those kinds of things. As a city employee,
She's a DDA
promoting
employee.
their own organization, like what does that look like?
We've had this conversation, she and I have had this conversation. I am aware of her In the Know nonprofit. It was something that we discussed even before I offered her a position. She knows that any event that involves the LVDDA is first and foremost. LVDDA is where her commitment lies. She's not getting anything financially out of this event. She is just another partner to help spread the word and engage across the community to bring attendees
To talk about mental health.
and to talk about mental health.
Okay, but again, wondering what the qualifications are of people that are doing things, and the poster for the program, everyone's in the know t-shirts, so she's getting promotion of her organization. Again, I don't know her, I don't know anything about the organization. I'm just asking as, what are our processes, procedures, rules? Are these things open to other other groups? This seems like a conflict, but yeah, that's why I'm asking what things are in place to
Can you tell me, how does it conflict? I'm just curious.
she's an employee of the city,
Okay.
and her organization is being promoted by the Lathrup Village DDA.
She's an employee of the DDA. I think we need to
Yes. yes.
clarify that the DDA and the city employees are two separate. The DDA has its own funding source.
Okay,
And while they
so,
do cost share and they do contribute a lot to the city's budget,
Mm.
they are their own separate organization.
okay, so at one point, wasn't that position Parks and Rec and
That was
No.
DDA?
temporary.
No.
That
We
was-
used to,
she
there was
promoted to
a,
that position?
there was a point in time where the DDA does provide cost sharing with the city. There was a point in time where the DDA contributed a portion of the Parks and Rec coordinator's salary. That is no longer the case. The city and the city contributes 10% to my salary and her salary. And we contribute 10% of the city administrator and the treasurer's salary, as well as the DDA. Let's see, we contribute 40% for code, 45 for code enforcement. And as well as a variety of other specific expenditures that helps the city function, quite frankly. We are responsible for the land, we're responsible for the maintenance of 696 Service Drive, for example.
So let me ask a question. So basically, we had a Parks and Rec coordinator, and then we had the DDA, the special projects. But when we lost the Parks and Rec coordinator, that's when the DDA special project person took
That's,
over.
yes, that's when the special projects
Right.
became part of it, and that person, that role is responsible for primarily the special projects are events that take place in the DDA district that had previously been delegated to the Parks and Rec coordinator.
So technically, city is paying 10% of the
They are,
salary.
but I think it's important to note that there is no obligation that the DDA share employees or any component of their budget with the city. I know the city is asked oftentimes for a lot more, and the DDA has been generous with the cost sharing. They're under no obligation to do that. Obviously, without the DDA's help, it would severely hamper, I think, a lot of the other cities' programming, not having that additional funding source, because the way the TIF district works, the capture from everything in that, all the business corridor taxes, any residents within that district, that tax revenue goes to the DDA. It doesn't go to the city's general fund.
Now, was Michigan First recently added to that group? Is that
No, the
something that I heard?
DDA, no, that was,
They were in the DD.
Initially,
They were-
initially it was amended because, or was added because the new, that area was added. It has to be a contiguous district, so that's why
was in
all those
99.
homes on 11 Mile were added.
in 99.
Yeah.
The original, the TIF was originally formed in 1998. Michigan First was added in 99.
And all the apartments were.
All
put in
those
at that point,
condos,
too?
all of the condos, all of the apartments on 11 Mile.
Yeah, they're all assessed that extra
No, those
2 mil
apartments
tax.
Oh, no, I'm
The
sorry,
apartments
not
over
the
here are
apartments on,
Not these
not-
here, the
I'm sorry.
condos on 11 Mile.
Yes.
The
Between
condos.
here and Michigan First.
yeah,
The other important thing, since we're talking about DDAs and that district, is that the DDA also captures the county portion of that tax revenue. And if there is a change in the district boundaries, the county has the opportunity to opt out the entire DDA district. That's why the DDA district has not been changed since '99.
that is correct.
For obviously, the county had any opportunity to opt out, has opted out, and that's well, not only is it a significant loss of revenue for the DDA, but that is revenue that the city also loses the opportunity to potentially take advantage of.
It's further beyond that too. That was in it, like the Huron Clinton. It's not just the county. There's a few other.
There might be a few.
Villages
smaller,
out
but
there.
Oakland Community.
the-
College.
Yeah,
And
okay,
Huron,
the
yeah.
county is
College
the significant
Right.
portion of
Yeah.
that, so.
We've got Parks, Oakland County Parks and Rec, as
yeah.
well as the HCMA, a little bit of refuse
Yeah.
and the OCC.
Well, there's just an appearance of special treatment for people, so I just want to make sure that things that are being done are open to.
Residents are always more than
residents.
welcome to contact me. I had a resident contact me today about wanting to do some food trucks, and that's would be lovely. So
Okay,
I mean,
put that out there.
I'm happy I talk to everybody. And if it's a project or program that I think the DDA is gonna get behind, then get behind it.
Okay, and then last, I put a FOIA in May 2nd at $824.04 and it is May 23rd, and I don't have anything and I've received no communication, so just wondering what's happening with that.
I mean, that's not an appropriate question for council.
Right.
I mean, that's as an individual making a FOIA request, that would be directed directly to the FOIA coordinator.
Okay,
Anything else?
Yes, our
You
businesses,
don't have your microphone on.
oh. Our businesses cooperating in Session.May Are they participating in it? There's that old business looks terrible. The guy moved down to Birmingham.
Mhm. As far as I know, you.
So are we not,
And
are we not ticketing them? It really looks bad. And it's in the business district and I didn't know if we voted for it, but are they participating in it too?
Well, I don't think you technically could give them a ticket when there's other people that aren't doing it also. That would be kind of, it does look bad. I mean,
Oh,
and
it
it looks
does.
like it
No, I
doesn't,
agree. I
but
drove
we'll,
past
we'll,
it
you know, agree on that one,
several
but it was stated for businesses and residents.
And are we not doing our parks either? Those are getting kind of long too.
They should be addressing the parks as we, as they need them.
Didn't know if they were participating, if that's why they were getting long.
No, they've been mowing City Hall. So they should be mowing the parks. I'll check into that tomorrow.
Do they do vacant properties?
Which
Like
vacant
vacant, what
property?
kind?
Like between houses and
Like
I don't know
city-owned-
what,
well,
Is it
are you
city-owned
sit-
property?
If it's city-owned.
well, that's what I don't know.
possibly. But if it's not a city-owned property, those would be
Like
nuisance.
I could see one,
nuisance cuts.
somebody did their whole lot, but the corner's not done. And I didn't know if that's it, the city owns it. Where is it? Red River and what's the circle around the house in the woods?
Rainbow
Is
or
that Rainbow?
Morningside?
Oh, yeah, I
The
can look at
plaza
it
right
here. Yeah. Yeah, Red River and whatever that is, Rainbow Circle. Yeah, it's all done except for the corner. And I don't know if the city usually mows that or if the resident just didn't mow it.
You'd have to be more specific. It's about, looking from here, it looks like there's 4 different corners, so.
Here. I'll get a picture. I'll
okay.
send it. It's just looking bad.
Check with the person that mows the lawns for the city. Check on the parks tomorrow too.
Anything else? Or, you done? Oh, okay. Well, if there's no other discussion, then I will adjourn the meeting. Have a good night.